Hey guys, tonight we are stepping into the Amazon. Not the modern delivery kind, but the endless green cathedral of trees, humidity, and buzzing life where every rustle carries the hint of a secret. You are here in the thick of it, the canopy pressing down like a heavy quilt, and the air so damp it feels like soup. Survival isn't guaranteed. In fact, you probably won't survive this. Not with mosquitoes the size of coins, jaguars moving like shadows, and people whose arrows carry poison so refined it makes modern lab science look like child's play. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, I'd love for you to drop a comment with your location and what time it is where you're listening. It's always fascinating to see this little sleepy community stretch across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking into dusk, where the Amazon hums like a vast living instrument. The river bends slow, the surface mirroring a sky half swallowed by vines and branches. Cicadas scream like 100 squeaky hinges, and somewhere above, a monkey shakes the canopy, careless, as if daring the forest to notice. The ground beneath your feet is damp, every step a muffled squelch, as though the earth itself doesn't want to let you go. And then you see them. Hunters, barefoot, silent, patient. They are shaping wood, hand steady, carving slender shafts from palm and cane. You crouch in the shadow of a buttress root, trying not to blink too loudly. One man runs his thumb along a fresh arrow shaft, nodding with satisfaction. The knife he uses is bone smooth, and it doesn't so much cut as persuade the wood into shape. Here, arrows aren't just weapons. They are survival distilled into form. To live in this rainforest, you need to master two things: food and fear. Both are answered by the arrows you now watch being born. A hunter tests the straightness of a shaft by rolling it against his thigh. It's a small act, but there's something mesmerizing in its precision. It reminds you of sharpening pencils in grade school. Only these pencils can bring down a tapir or send a curious rival stumbling into permanent sleep. Mainstream fact: anthropologists know many Amazonian peoples relied on palmwood for arrow shafts, especially Guianerium sagittatum, a grass so perfectly straight that Europeans later imported it for their own arrows. You don't find that in your standard archery catalog, but here it's common knowledge. Quirky tidbit. You notice a boy sitting nearby, tugging at a monkey skull, strung like a toy. The skull rattles with tiny seeds, a jungle rattle used to soothe him while his father works. You can't help but smile. Your parents gave you plastic keys, his gave him a piece of the food chain. Historians still argue whether poison-tipped arrows were first invented for hunting efficiency or for warfare. The jungle, after all, doesn't give clear answers. Its history is hidden in oral stories, whispers carried with the smoke of cooking fires. The hunters scrape bark, tie sinew, and press feathers into place. You see a man pause, adjusting the fletching, 3 slivers of macaw feather glued in alignment. The colors, red, blue, yellow, glow even in twilight. The feathers aren't chosen for beauty, though beauty is what you see. They are chosen for how they stabilize flight, guiding death with more accuracy than you'd expect in a world with no rulers, no measuring tape. You shift your weight, careful not to break a twig. Every small sound here can feel like betrayal. A mosquito lands on your hand, its proboscis a tiny spear. You slap it, smear, and feel like you've committed a crime against the forest itself. The hunters continue, murmuring low in a language you don't fully understand. The syllables seem to ride the air like part of the insect chorus. For a moment you wonder if the arrows themselves are listening, if each shaft is marked with invisible words, a kind of quiet enchantment. You lean closer, half dreaming, half aware, and realize this is how it begins, the hidden survival secrets of poison arrows. Not with drama, not with battle, but with steady hands, wood against thigh, feather against glue, and the knowledge that the forest provides both life and death, often in the same breath. And just as twilight deepens, one hunter lifts a finished arrow, inspecting its length against the fading light. The point is bare for now, unpoisoned, but already it hums with promise, as if the forest has whispered its approval into the shaft. You feel the air cool slightly as night arrives, and you're not sure if it's relief or a warning. The forest never sleeps. Neither tonight will you. The firelight flickers low, shadows stretching long across the roots and tangled undergrowth, as the hunters carry their bundle of unfinished arrows deeper into the clearing. You follow behind, careful not to trip on vines that hang like forgotten ropes from the canopy. The smell of damp wood, sweat, and resin follows you, earthy and sharp, the scent of survival boiled down to its essence. They sit again, this time by a flat stone worn smooth by years of work. One man holds a shaft upright, pinching it with thumb and forefinger, and begins sanding it with a strip of rough bark. The motion is hypnotic, forward, back, until the shaft gleams faintly in the fire's glow. Arrows here are not rushed. Each one is a quiet marriage of patience and necessity. You watch them carve nocks into the ends, delicate grooves where bowstrings will one day rest. Some shafts will be fitted to bows, others to blowguns, those silent tubes that can spit death across 50 feet of jungle air without so much as a whisper. You imagine yourself holding one, your lips pressed to polished wood, lungs filling like a bellows, then pfft, the faintest breath transformed into lethal precision. Mainstream fact. Archaeologists have found that in much of the Amazon, arrows were dual purpose, sometimes tipped with sharp hardwood or bone, other times hollowed slightly to carry poison paste. In places, whole quivers of arrows were carried with two versions of the same shaft, one for stunning, one for killing. The hunters now move to the tips. You lean in as a boy, no older than 12, is handed a tiny stone blade. He is expected to practice, shaving down a stub of palm wood into a fine point. His tongue pokes out the side of his mouth in concentration, just like yours did when you tried writing your name the first time. His father chuckles softly, but does not correct him. The jungle is the only teacher stricter than a parent. Quirky tidbit. One man hums while working, a tune that is suspiciously similar to a bird call. You realize it's not just a habit, but a form of camouflage. If strangers hear it in the forest, they'll assume it's a bird rather than a person. Imagine blending in with your environment so thoroughly that even your lullabies become disguises. You notice a pile of feathers nearby, brilliantly colored, stripped from macaws and parrots. Some are long and straight, perfect for fletching. Others are smaller, destined for decoration, or traded later to outsiders who see only beauty, not function. The feathers are arranged not haphazardly, but in careful bundles, sorted by size, a quiet catalog of nature's spare parts. The hunters pause, and one dips a fingertip into a dark pot, smearing resin along the shaft's end. The smell is sharp, acrid, almost like burning rubber. You wrinkle your nose, but here, the resin is glue, the invisible bond that turns wood, feather, and point into a single organism. Without it, everything would unravel. Historians still argue whether the blowgun or the bow came first in the Amazon. Some suggest the bow was a later import, trickling in from the Andes or beyond. Others argue blowguns are older, uniquely adapted to a forest where silence is everything. The truth, like most truths in the Amazon, stays hidden beneath layers of leaves and time. One hunter lifts a nearly finished arrow, placing it against his cheek, feeling its weight and balance. He nods, satisfied. Then, with a flick, he plants it in the ground beside him. You hear a soft thunk, and the arrow quivers slightly, alive in its stillness. The boy with the monkey skull rattle shakes it again, laughing quietly, then hushes as his father glances his way. Even laughter has its limits here. A jaguar could be near, or worse, a rival hunter, listening for weakness. And yet, despite the danger, the scene feels oddly soothing. You sit, breathing with them, part of this slow ritual. Every scrape of bark against wood is like a lullaby, each feather pressed into glue, a reminder that life here is layered, fragile and fierce all at once. You tilt your head back and see the sky fractured by branches, a few stars breaking through. Somewhere in the distance an owl hoots. Another answers. You realize you're not just witnessing arrows being made, you're watching a conversation between human hands and the forest itself, a dialogue carried in materials, sounds, and silence. The hunters tie the shafts in neat bundles. They are not yet weapons, but they are promises. Promises that tomorrow or the next day, someone will eat, someone will live, and perhaps someone else will not. For now, though, the night belongs to the fire, the smell of resin, and the steady, hypnotic rhythm of wood against skin. You step closer to the tree with the careful respect you'd use approaching a celebrity. Quiet, a little starstruck, and trying not to make eye contact in case it explodes. The trunk bleeds a milky sap where a thin cut shines in the torchlight. It is slow, patient, and sticky. So sticky, you could glue your entire to-do list to it and never lose a page again. A hunter tilts a gourd beneath the wound, and the first drop falls with the solemnity of a bell. You breathe in the scent, bitter, green, a little like pepper chewing a dandelion. Your tongue puckers in sympathy, and you promise yourself you will not find out how it tastes. Not tonight, hero. The forest seems to lean in, listening. You've been smelling resin since the fletching started. Remember that sharp glue that made your eyes water? But this is different. This sap keeps its promises. It's destined for arrow tips, blowgun darts. Maybe the kind of traps that make curious animals decide curiosity is overrated. The hunter's hand moves steady as rain. He never rushes the drip. The first drop is polite. He whispers half to himself. The last drop is angry. You decide you have met enough angry things for one lifetime. He moves on to another tree. A cousin in the same hidden family. The bark here flakes in thin scales, and when it's nicked, the sap threads out in transparent strings. It stretches like sugar pulled by a candy maker, except this candy is the opposite of a bedtime snack. Another gourd waits, another patient minute passes, and the resin collects, layer upon glistening layer. Your job is simple: keep quiet and keep the torch from sputtering. You are overqualified for at least one of those tasks. Mainstream fact. Early European visitors documented these poisons with equal parts fascination and confusion. In the 1590s and into the 1800s, writers from Jose de Acosta to Alexander von Humboldt described South American aerotoxins, later called curare in various spellings, and the guarded rituals around gathering saps and vines for them. Their notes often read like detective diaries. Lots of clues, not many confessions. Here, in the present tense of leaf and breath, the method matters less than the mood. The resin is proof that the forest keeps a pharmacy behind every curtain of vines. Some trees offer latex that blisters skin. Handled carefully, those same juices can be part of a paste that persuades a wild pig to lie down and rethink its life choices. Others bleed bitters that never touch a wound but anchor the mixture, thickening it so it clings to a point the way a secret clings to a whisper. The ingredients have nicknames you won't hear twice in one village, and the recipes change with the season, the moon, the personality of the hunter, and the way the wind happens to be gossiping that day. You watch as the eldest man lifts his knife again, tracing a small V-shaped cut so sap can gather and slide rather than run wild. A girl, 8, maybe 9, holds a leaf like a tiny funnel. She is the assistant tonight, her seriousness rivaled only by her determination not to scratch the mosquito bite on your ankle. The sap snakes down the leaf and plinks into the gourd with a sound soft as a raindrop on a drum. She grins, proud and ceremonial, and you realize knowledge here does not wear a diploma. It wears calluses and a patient smile. Quirky tidbit. One of the hunters insists the best resin is collected at dawn because the tree yawns then and lets go. Another swears by the second night after a light rain because everything remembers it was once water. You mentally file this under forest weather apps, the subscription you didn't know you needed. The elders trade trees the way librarians trade footnotes. This one for sticking, a man says, touching the bark with 2 fingers. This one for sleeping, he adds, pointing at a vine you're absolutely sure is glaring at you. You learn that some saps are not the main act. They're the backstage crew, binders, carriers, preservatives that keep a paste from spoiling in the heat. Others are decoys, smeared on decoy arrows so enemies grow nervous and clumsy. Power here is as much about uncertainty as it is about chemistry. When danger might be anywhere, anywhere becomes polite. Historians still argue whether European tales of the legendary Upas tree, the so-called tree of death from far-off islands, bled into early accounts of Amazon poisons, muddling maps and myths. Were storytellers exaggerating, or were readers just hearing what they wanted to hear? The debate continues, a long after-dinner conversation where no one remembers who asked the first question. You shift the torch, and the light catches a different trunk, pocked, buttressed, banded with fine lichen. A thin groove shines where it was tapped last season. Never take too much, someone murmurs. The forest is an economy without spreadsheets. Overdraw your account, and the penalties arrive as silence, then scarcity. The group moves in a small circle so trees can rest. It's a management strategy older than clipboards. You notice a leather pouch filled with charcoal. When fingers touch resin, the charcoal dust dulls the shine, keeps the drip from slicking skin. Someone smears a thin stripe across your wrist as a charm and a practical warning. You look like a raccoon who's been fingerprinted, which is a good look on you, honestly. The hunters seem amused. Your contributions to the process is mainly standing very still and trying not to invent new dance moves each time an ant discovers your shoe. Another tree gives a different scent, peppery, with a background note that reminds you of green tea left too long on the counter. Good for the mix, they say, keeps it from running. You imagine a blender, then decide that's not the vibe. Here, everything is stirred in gourds, smoked by coals, convinced rather than forced. You will learn more later. For now, the lesson is that poison, like soup and gossip, begins with a simmer and a quiet hand. You try to picture how this sap will live its future life at the tip of an arrow. It will dry to a skin that looks harmless, then liquefy with breath and blood and humidity when it matters. It will make speed and silence more persuasive than strength. It will turn the difference between hunger and dinner into a matter of angles. You are, at best, an apprentice to this reality. Your camping skills are mostly snack-based resilience and optimistic Googling, and the jungle has exactly 0 bars. The night deepens. A toad calls from somewhere under a log, then another answers with the comedic timing of a vaudeville duo. The girl with the leaf yawns, a wide theatrical yawn that makes you do it too. A hunter smiles, taps the gourd. Enough, he says. The tree has told us enough. He presses a wad of fiber into the cut to help it close, a small act of reciprocity. You pocket that gesture in your mind. Even here, even with poisons, the work is threaded with manners. They wrap the gourds in leaves and tie them with vine cord. No labels, no color-coded caps, just knowledge in the knots and the order they are stacked. You ask, in a whisper, how they remember which is which. The elder taps his temple, then his chest. If I forget here, he says, I remember here. You nod like you understand, which at 2 levels out of 10, you maybe do. As you stand to go, the forest exhales cool air from the river. The resin in the gourds gleams, a tiny harvest of moonlight. You realize you've seen something most outsiders never witness. The slow patience of gathering from secret trees, where danger begins as a droplet and ends as a decision. In the morning, those decisions will fly feathered and quiet. You lift the torch a final time and the clearing returns to leaves and shadows, the cut on the trunk already drying to a pale seam. The path home is soft and dark, and your steps make a hush like brushes across a drum. Behind you, the tree stands upright and unblaming, a co-author whose byline will never appear, and yet every arrow will carry its signature. You wake before dawn, though wake might not be the right word. The forest never really let you sleep. It just shifted the soundtrack from cicadas to frogs to owls and back again. Now the air is heavy with mist, the kind that beads on your eyelashes and makes your hair stick to your forehead like you've been dipped in soup. The hunters are already moving, quiet as ghosts, carrying gourds filled with the night's harvest. You fall into step, bare feet slapping against the damp ground, and soon you smell it. Something simmering, bitter and rich, curling through the fog like a warning. They've built a fire on a flat patch of earth, its coals glowing more orange than flame. Around it sit clay pots blackened by years of use, their surfaces cracked but still loyal. A hunter lifts one pot, pours the resin in, and you hear the faint hiss as it hits the heat. The sap bubbles immediately, thickening into something tarry, a smell sharp enough to pinch your sinuses. The men lean back as the smoke rises. You cough and try to act like you belong here, but your lungs betray you with a wheeze. One man chuckles. Forrest doesn't like visitors, he says. You nod, trying to smile while your throat feels like you swallowed a campfire. Mainstream fact: the most famous of these jungle poisons is curare, made from vines like Chondrodendron tomentosum or Strychnos toxifera. Its key alkaloids block nerve signals, paralyzing muscles while leaving the victim fully conscious. European scientists in the 19th century were both horrified and fascinated, eventually adapting it into medical anesthetics. What was once a hunting weapon became, bizarrely, a hospital tool. The pot hisses again, this time with a ladle stirring slowly. The hunter's face glows in the firelight, expression unreadable. He dips a stick in, lifts it, and watches as the liquid strings downward in lazy arcs. Not yet, he mutters. The mixture is too thin. It needs to thicken until it clings, until it promises not to slide off an arrow point at the first brush of grass. Quirky tidbit. You learn that some groups test the thickness of poison paste by dipping a feather. If the feather bends but doesn't drip, the mix is ready. Imagine explaining that at a science fair. My project is how to glue death onto a bird's former wing accessory. The judges would smile nervously and slowly back away. The fire crackles as more ingredients join the brew. A vine scrap here, a pinch of powdered bark there. One man pulls out a bundle wrapped in leaves, unwraps it with the care of opening a birthday present, and drops the contents into the pot. You lean in and realize it's an entire beetle, roasted crisp. Flavor, he says, deadpan. You laugh, thinking he's joking. He isn't. The beetle sinks and vanishes, the mixture swallowing it whole. You glance at your own stomach and decide breakfast can wait. Historians still argue whether curare recipes were standardized or wildly improvised. Some sources claim each village guarded its exact formula like a royal crown, while others insist recipes shifted depending on who was alive, what plants were in season, and what mood the shaman happened to be in. Maybe both are true. Maybe the point was that outsiders would never really know. The bubbling deepens into a thick plop, like mud stirred in slow motion. The hunters lean in again, dipping sticks, nodding in approval. One smears a dab onto his fingertip, on the nail, not the skin, and lets it dry. When he taps it against the pot's rim, it clings stubbornly, refusing to fall. Good, he says. His voice is calm, but you feel the quiet gravity of the moment. This is no longer sap. It is now promise, now weapon, now the line between hunger and dinner, safety and danger. You notice that while the men tend the brew, the women sit nearby weaving baskets. At first it looks like two separate worlds, one of death, one of daily life. But then you realize the baskets will carry food hunted with these arrows. It's all one cycle, no division. You feel oddly comforted by that symmetry, even as the smell of poison continues to make your nose run. A child toddles near the fire, reaching for the pot. You freeze, ready to leap, but his mother gently tugs him back with one hand while never missing a stitch in her weaving. Clearly this is not her first rodeo. You wonder how many generations of toddlers have been steered away from bubbling death with the same casual motion. Parenting here is part reflex, part ritual. The hunter smears a bit of the thickened resin onto a finished arrowhead. He holds it up, the firelight painting the shaft in red gold hues. The poison glistens like molasses, sticky, dark, final. He waves it gently, and the liquid does not drip. It clings like it belongs there. You watch as several more arrows are coated, each one placed carefully on a rack to dry. They are spaced apart so they don't touch, because one careless nudge would ruin everything. The rack looks a little like a line of laundry, except what hangs here could kill a boar, a rival, or, let's be honest, you, if you so much as sneeze in the wrong direction. A breeze picks up, carrying the smell of the jungle, earth, flowers, wet leaves. For a moment it mingles with the bitter smoke, and you imagine the forest itself leaning down, approving. You feel a shiver, half fear, half awe. When the last pot is emptied and the coals die down, the hunters cover the remaining paste with leaves, tucking it into the earth like putting a child to bed. Nothing wasted, nothing left careless. The forest doesn't forgive carelessness. You know this now. As the mist lifts and the first real birds of morning call, you realize you have just seen the transformation. Sap to smoke, smoke to paste, paste to promise. It is alchemy without gold, science without textbooks, and faith without sermons. The arrows glisten, drying in the dawn, each one a slender line between life and loss. And you, still coughing faintly, are now closer to understanding why the forest survives. Because here, every secret is sharpened, feathered, and tipped with patience. The sun finally pushes through the canopy in thin, reluctant beams, and the mist burns off like steam rising from a kettle. The hunters motion for you to follow. You leave behind the drying rack of arrows in the smoldering pit, stepping into a jungle that feels half asleep and half plotting against you. Every step is a puzzle. Roots twist like ropes, leaves slap your shoulders, and vines grab at your ankles as though they resent your presence. You notice the hunters carry nothing that jingles or clatters. Their bundles are silent, gourds sealed, arrows wrapped in leaves, blowguns long and dark as shadows. You realize that silence itself is survival here, an invisible shield. Even the children walking alongside seem quieter than you ever managed at their age. The air is cooler under the trees, but the weight of humidity is relentless. You wipe your forehead, which only makes it wetter. A hunter glances back and smiles, the kind of smile that says, yes, the forest owns you already. You shrug, and he chuckles, soundless except for the movement of his shoulders. They lead you off the faint trail into deeper green, where the canopy knots so tight it feels like a ceiling. The ground grows softer, and you realize you are near a stream. Frogs croak lazily, each one a baritone voice in the unseen choir. The hunters crouch, searching beneath low plants, moving leaves aside with the delicacy of librarians flipping old pages. There it is, a vine thick as your wrist, dark green with lighter streaks, winding up the trunk of a tree. The elder gestures and everyone stops. He touches the vine, murmurs something low, and pulls a knife from his belt. He slices gently, and a bead of liquid forms, clear, but with a faint shimmer in the light. He dabs the bead with a stick, never skin, never careless. Mainstream fact: curare from vines like chondrodendron or strychnos contains alkaloids that paralyze by blocking neuromuscular signals. It doesn't stop the heart directly, but it prevents breathing muscles from working. Imagine drowning without water, your body locked while your mind is still awake. No wonder hunters treated these vines with reverence, not recklessness. You watch as they cut a section and coil it like a rope. The elder places it in a basket lined with leaves, as though tucking it into a cradle. You realize the poison doesn't come from one ingredient, but from a family of plants, each adding its own note to the deadly symphony. Quirky tidbit: one hunter insists the vine must be harvested when birds sing at dawn, otherwise the poison loses strength. Another claims it works better if a woman, not a man, is the first to touch it. You imagine modern pharmacologists throwing up their hands at that, but here, tradition isn't just superstition, it's generations of experiments, each trial paid for in hunger or survival. Historians still argue whether knowledge of these vines originated in one culture and spread, or whether multiple groups discovered their secrets independently. The Amazon is so vast, so diverse, that parallel inventions are not just possible but likely. You find yourself wondering how many discoveries never made it into the record, lost when a single elder died without passing on the recipe. The hunters continue, collecting vines in silence, wrapping each coil in leaves to keep it moist. You reach out to steady yourself on a trunk, but a boy shakes his head sharply. You withdraw your hand, and only then notice the ants marching in a line as thick as a shoelace, jaws ready to punish your ignorance. You whisper a thanks you hope the forest accepts. The group pauses by the stream. One man dips a gourd in and drinks deeply. Another wets his hands and splashes his face. You kneel, scoop water into your palm, and gulp. It tastes of earth and leaves, alive in a way bottled water never is. Then you remember the stories of parasites and microbes, and silently hope you've just ingested bravery rather than illness. The elder unwraps a vine coil and places it on a flat stone. With a wooden mallet, he begins pounding it, the fibers breaking open with each strike. The sound echoes through the trees, dull and rhythmic, like a drum muffled by moss. Juice seeps out, staining the stone dark. He scrapes it into a leaf, folds the leaf neatly, and sets it aside. Piece by piece, juice by juice, the poison is gathered. Children watch carefully, learning when to step close and when to keep distance. You realize the entire village participates in this knowledge. Not everyone makes poison, but everyone knows how to respect it. As the vine juices collect, the hunters mix them with the resins gathered the night before. The brew grows darker, thicker, more sinister. They test it by dipping a splinter of wood and touching it against a frog. The frog twitches once, twice, then stills. The hunters nod. You blink, trying not to. A boy notices your unease and whispers, "Don't worry, we never waste." He gestures, and sure enough, the frog will be food. Nothing here is lost, not even in the making of death. You take a deep breath and let it out slowly, trying to absorb not just the method but the mood. This isn't cruelty, it's calculus. The careful balancing of hunger, danger, and survival in a forest that offers both abundance and threat in equal measure. As the group gathers the last of the vines, you look around and realize you are surrounded by secrets that outsiders rarely see. Every leaf could be medicine, every vine could be poison, every silence could hide knowledge. You're part of this lesson now, whether you asked for it or not. The forest hums with life, indifferent to your awe. The hunters rise, gourds heavy with juice, and motion you onward. You follow, heart thudding, carrying not arrows but the weight of understanding that here, survival is not strength alone, but knowing which vine whispers and which vine screams. You come back to the work fire after a short walk to stretch your legs, and the camp has shifted into a new, careful rhythm, the long boil. The little simmer you watched before was only the opening act, a rehearsal with sap and smoke. Now, the real cooking begins, and everyone treats the pots like their temperamental relatives who must be respected, fed, and never startled. Clay vessels sit cradled in rings of stone, each pot wearing a collar of green leaves to keep stray ash from falling in. The coals glow like patient stars. You kneel beside the eldest hunter as he lifts a ladleful of dark liquid. It pours in a ribbon that looks heavy, like honey thinking difficult thoughts. He blows across the surface, one long, steady breath, then listens to the way the bubbles answer. The forest has 1,000 thermometers. Here, the sound of the boil is one of them. Another hunter adds a fist of shredded vine. A third pinches gray ash between finger and thumb and sprinkles it as if salting a stew. No one tastes. That would be ambitious. You remember the thin glazes from earlier? Those first cautious reductions that clung to arrowheads like a promise. This is different. This batch is for storage, for trade, for the season when the river rises and hunting grows tricky. You can smell the plant in it, bitter, earthy, a little metallic, like wet stones after rain. It's not unpleasant exactly. It's just serious. Mainstream fact, despite the drama, game filled with curare is safe to eat because the principal alkaloids don't absorb well through the digestive tract. Hunters knew this long before pharmacologists explained neuromuscular junctions. They simply noticed that families could share a curare-killed tapir and wake up fine the next morning. The tapir did not contribute to this finding, but you appreciate his role in the literature. The stirring sticks are carved from a wood that doesn't splinter easily. You're told each stick must never touch the ground, not once, not ever. If it does, the batch loses its temper. Is that chemistry or ceremony? You decide it's both. The sticks rest across forked holders when not in use, little thrones for little scepters. A boy stands guard with the intensity of a museum docent who has said, "Please don't touch" 43 times today and is ready to make it 44. Over by the shade, a woman kneads a lump of resin like dough, warming it with her palms, then pinches off a walnut-sized pellet. She flattens it into a wafer that will later seal a gourd. You can't help thinking of cookies, which is unhelpful and also mildly offensive to cookies. She sees your expression and smirks. You have been caught dessert thinking at the poison table. The boil deepens. The pots are kept just this side of furious. Too much heat and the mix scorches. Too little and it sulks. Someone fans the coals with a woven palm frond, each slow sweep like a lullaby for embers. Another grinds dry leaves into powder with a stone, the rhythm steady and patient. The leaf dust looks like old tea and smells like an argument between pepper and smoke. Quirky tidbit. One pot gets a single drop of cassava juice. Yes, the same starchy plant you know from tapioca. In its raw form, it contains cyanogenic compounds, and here a drop is believed to wake the mix. Another pot gets no drop at all. The elder likes to keep a control batch without saying the word control. You are essentially attending a jungle A/B test. Congratulations, you're in product. Listen, the elder says, and you do. The bubbles aren't all the same. One pot talks in a low murmur, the sound of the thick soup clearing its throat. Another ticks more sharply, a metronome with opinions. The elder nods toward the metronome pot. That one is ready to be paid attention to. You make a mental note to try that phrase on your next email. Historians still argue whether the long, careful boil modifies the alkaloids in a meaningful biochemical way, or whether it mainly concentrates them and blends in resins that improve adhesion. Some field notes claim specific temperature stages were crucial. Others suggest the ritual timing, songs, silence, the order of additions, mattered as much as the heat. The debate, like the boil, keeps going, sometimes loudly, sometimes in a thoughtful simmer. A man lifts a feather, bright, blue, perfect, and dips only the tip into the darkest pot. He raises it slowly, no drip forms. The liquid makes a soft meniscus around the barbs, a tiny halo holding tight. He turns the feather sideways, gives the gentlest flick. Still no drop. A few people nod the way bakers nod when a loaf sounds right. You love that people can hear readiness. They switch to a smaller ladle, drawing off the thickest layer into a clean clay cup. It cools just enough to spread like warm wax. A hunter brushes it along a row of blowgun darts the length of your hand, each one shaved thin as a matchstick. He lays the darts on a rack, points up, careful that none touch. The tips shine like wet coffee. A soft breeze stirs the rack, and every dart tilts in unison, as if saluting. You salute back, because honestly, they earned it. You catch yourself staring at the surface of the pot as if it were going to spell something. It does not, but the patterns are hypnotic. Circles open and close, filigrees form and vanish, the way puddles look when a light rain restarts. The elder's wrist turns the ladle through those circles like a compass drawing neat arcs. He hums a tune with 3 notes, down, up, down, over and over. You hear it now in the boil, woven in like a quiet instruction. Someone brings over a length of bamboo and a handful of blackened cork stoppers. The concentrated paste will be poured into these tubes, then plugged tight and smoked briefly to harden the seals. The tubes ride well in a basket, withstand rain, and can be reopened with a hot knife. You imagine a traveling kit of tidy doom and marvel at the logistics. Weight, weather, shelf life, all handled without spreadsheets or barcodes. Mainstream fact, the sequel. When curare came to European medicine in the 20th century, it arrived in carefully prepared ampoules and standardized doses, clean rooms, white coats, everything labeled. Yet the origin remained this: boiling vines in clay, judging by feather and ear. The distance between lab and campfire turns out to be shorter than you assumed. A boy brings you a leaf with a bead of fresh paste on it and the most serious eyebrow you have ever seen. For learning, not touching, he announces, then places it on a rock where you can stare safely. You do. It dries to a skin that looks like lacquer, glossy and fragile. A gnat lands, decides immediately it has somewhere else to be, and leaves you a memo about your life choices. Across the fire, 2 women discuss when to stop. One argues for another half hour. The river wind is rising, it will cool it fast, while the other prefers to remove it now and let the sun finish the work. The elder listens, weighs both, and splits the difference. You admire the governance model. Everyone respected, no one dramatic, outcomes practical. You think of the monkey skull rattle from the other night and wonder where it is. Then you hear it, faint, keeping time for a child who's counting darts as they dry. The rattle and the boil make a duet. Somehow, it's soothing. You lean back on your elbows, watching smoke ladder into the canopy, and catch your mind drifting. A nap would be unscholarly. You take a dignified blink instead. As the last ladles are poured, the pots are scraped clean with leaves that will be burned, not tossed. The stirring sticks go back on their thrones. The fans stop. The sound shifts from boil to birds, from labor to ordinary day. People talk again in normal voices. Someone laughs about your earlier cough, then hands you a gourd of water as a peace offering. You take a cautious sip and feel the world slide coolly down your throat. The finished paste in its bamboo tubes looks anonymous, almost shy. No labels, no skulls and crossbones, just a quiet weight in your hand and a reminder that secrets don't need theatrics. Power here is not loud. It is patient, adhesive, and carried in baskets. When you stand, your knees crack audibly, the only snap allowed near the poison today. You stretch, and the elder gives you a conspiratorial look. Now, he says, we let it rest. Tomorrow we ask it to fly. You nod like a person who absolutely plans to be here tomorrow, even if the forest and your ankles have negotiated other ideas without consulting you. You help carry the tubes to a cool, shaded niche behind the longhouse where things sleep and keep. The air there smells like ash and leaves and a little like old stories. You set one tube carefully in place and feel a strange pride, as if you'd contributed more than breath, blinking and not touching. It's enough. The jungle is generous with apprenticeships so long as you stay humble, stay quiet, and keep your stirring stick off the ground. Morning thins into noon, and by now you're beginning to understand the rhythm. Gather, prepare, rest, repeat. After the long night of boiling, the hunters let the poison sleep in its bamboo tubes, sealed and silent. But the arrows themselves aren't complete yet, not without their guides. You follow them down a narrow trail until the forest opens into a clearing alive with color. Macaws scream overhead like feathered alarms. Parrots squabble in branches, and hummingbirds flicker so fast they look like impatient stars. The hunters glance up, not with awe, but with calculation. To you, the birds are dazzling. To them, they are a hardware store in flight. One man lifts a small net, tosses it into the air, and pulls it down again in a motion so smooth you almost miss it. When he opens it, a handful of feathers are trapped, bright as jewels. He shakes the net gently. The birds dart away unharmed, a little ruffled, a little lighter. The feathers swirl down into his hand like a gift of confetti. They bring the feathers back to camp and spread them out on a mat. Some are long and straight, perfect for fletching. Others are curved, destined for decoration or trade. The elder lifts a red feather, holds it against a shaft, and nods. This one flies straight, he says. You realize the colors aren't chosen just for beauty, though beauty comes free, but for how the feathers cut air, how they balance flight. Mainstream fact, most indigenous arrows in the Amazon use 2 or 3 feathers for fletching, glued or tied in precise patterns. The macaw and parrot provided the best material, durable, lightweight, and abundant in the canopy. Hunters knew which part of which feather gave the truest flight. Anthropologists have recorded dozens of distinct fletching styles, each like a signature of its maker. The children join in now, small fingers plucking downy bits and smoothing them flat. A girl giggles when a feather sticks to your nose and you pretend to sneeze it away. She shrieks with laughter, then hushes as her mother glares, though even the mother's lips twitch at the corners. Humor, it seems, is allowed here, just not too loud. Quirky tidbit. Some groups believe parrots lend part of their spirit to the arrows when their feathers are used, making the arrows cleverer at finding prey. Others say a macaw's red feather is a charm for courage, while a green one helps the hunter blend in the forest. You picture an entire library of superstitions, each feather a different chapter. Historians still argue whether feather choice was more about physics or faith. Was it aerodynamics discovered through trial and error, or symbolism encoded into survival? Maybe both. You hold a feather yourself, twist it in the light, and wonder if the line between science and spirit is as blurry as the feather's edge. The hunters cut small slits into the shafts and insert feathers, securing them with resin or sinew. You watch the elders' hands move quickly, practiced, tying knots without looking. The shafts, bare and pale before, suddenly look alive, bright streaks of color flashing in the dim light of the forest. Each arrow is both a tool and a piece of art, quiet proof that survival can be beautiful. A boy picks up one finished arrow and points it skyward, eyes narrow, body stiff like a warrior from a story. His father plucks it back gently, chuckling. "Not yet," he says, tucking the arrow into a quiver. The boy sulks for exactly 3 seconds before running off to chase a chicken, proving that childhood is a constant, jungle or no jungle. You crouch closer to the mat, fascinated by the neat rows of shafts now feathered and ready. They lie in quiet order, red and yellow and green tips catching the light like a garden planted sideways. Each one is waiting for its final christening, the poison you watch bubble and thicken through the night. But without feathers, that poison would only drip into the soil. Together, they make flight possible, silence deadly. The elder leans back, stretches his arms, and sighs. He holds up a blue feather, looks at it against the sun, and then sticks it behind his ear. Everyone laughs, and he grins like a mischievous uncle at a wedding. Even here, with death drying on bamboo racks, there is room for jokes. You think again of the boy's monkey skull rattle, how laughter and lethality seem to walk hand in hand in this place. The afternoon heat deepens, the air thick as syrup. Birds wheel overhead, still noisy, but you notice none fly too low. Maybe they know what's happening here. Maybe they've seen their feathers come back as something more than decoration. You take one last look at the finished shafts, each one now bright, balanced, ready. They will dry by the fire until evening, and when night falls again, the poison will meet the feathers. Until then, you carry the image of their colors in your mind. Arrows that look almost too beautiful to be dangerous, yet are more dangerous precisely because they are beautiful. By evening, the arrows no longer look like bare sticks with decorations. They sit in neat bundles beside the fire, each one fletched, balanced, and humming with quiet purpose. But tonight, your attention shifts from the arrow itself to the thing that makes it whisper death without a sound, the blowgun. The hunters bring them out slowly, as if unveiling an heirloom. Long, straight tubes of polished wood, some nearly 3 meters long, others shorter for younger hands. They look deceptively simple, just sticks you think at first. But then you notice the smoothness of their bore, the precise taper, the faint shine of resin rubbed in layer after layer. They're not sticks at all, they're instruments, the kind you'd only hand to someone who knows how to coax music from silence. One hunter tilts his blowgun toward the fire so you can see inside. It gleams like the inside of a seashell, hollow and flawless. He lifts a dart, shorter than your finger, and places it at the mouthpiece. He raises the tube, cheeks puff, and then, poof, a tiny sound, like blowing dust off a window. A heartbeat later, the dart is buried in a tree trunk, quivering. You didn't even see it fly. Mainstream fact: blowguns have been used across the Amazon for centuries, sometimes made from palm wood split in half, hollowed carefully, and then bound back together with resin so tightly that not a breath can leak. Some tribes coated the inside with wax or resin to reduce friction, making darts glide with uncanny smoothness. You're handed a blowgun yourself. It's lighter than you expected, but the length makes it awkward. You lift it to your lips, take a breath, and blow. The dart tumbles out and plops into the dirt 2 feet away, defeated. The children laugh so hard one falls over. You grin sheepishly and mutter something about just testing trajectory. No one believes you. Quirky tidbit. You learn that some hunters once played pranks by loading darts with nothing but chewed fruit or pepper powder, aiming them at each other during festivals. One man tells you about being pepper darted in the neck as a boy and sneezing so violently he thought the spirits were trying to shake him apart. Historians still argue whether blowguns were primarily hunting tools or if they doubled as weapons of war. The silence of the shot suggests stealth hunting, but there are stories of ambushes where entire raiding parties were felled before they even knew what hit them. The debate continues, like the dart you shot earlier, weakly stuck in the dirt, but refusing to quit. The hunters demonstrate again. One crouches, raises the tube, and in a single breath drops a dart into the center of a banana leaf 20 paces away. Another does the same, splitting the leaf down its middle vein with uncanny precision. You watch in awe as arrow after arrow whispers into green targets, the darts vanishing into foliage as if the forest itself swallowed them. The elder takes a turn, but not at a leaf. He aims at a low branch where a bird has landed, tilting its head curiously. A soft pft, and the bird flutters once, then stills. He walks over, retrieves it gently, and whispers something over the small body before handing it to a boy who tucks it into a pouch. Dinner, earned with silence. You're given another try. This time, a boy pats your shoulder and whispers, "Don't think. Just blow like you want the forest to disappear." You take a breath, steady the tube, and exhale. The dart zips out, landing halfway up the trunk of a tree. Not perfect, but better. The boy nods solemnly, as though you've passed a test. The night grows darker. The blowguns lay down beside their quivers like sleeping snakes. You realize that each tool here, the feathers, the sap, the darts, is nothing without the lungs behind it. All the poison in the world means nothing without a steady breath to carry it. It makes you oddly self-conscious about your own breathing, about the rise and fall of your chest in this damp, endless air. You lean back, staring up at the canopy. The stars are faint, blocked by leaves, but you can feel them out there, watching. The hunters sit nearby, sharpening, laughing softly, telling stories you don't understand but whose rhythms feel familiar, like fire crackling or waves lapping. You catch a word here and there, enough to realize some of the jokes are about you. You smile anyway. The blowguns gleam faintly in the firelight, long, patient, waiting. Tomorrow, you're told, there will be practice in earnest, moving targets, perhaps even a hunt. You swallow, wondering if your lungs are up to the task. For now, though, you close your eyes and let the faint pot echo in your ears, the soft hiss of breath transformed into survival. It is the quietest weapon you've ever met, and somehow the loudest lesson. Dawn breaks again, mist curling low like spilled milk over the forest floor. The hunters rise before the parrots even warm up their voices, and today they bring out the quivers filled with freshly tipped, freshly feathered arrows. The poison paste gleams faintly where it has dried, a sheen like lacquer that catches the weak light. You feel your throat tighten. This is no longer practice with empty sticks. These are alive in a way tools shouldn't be. You trail the hunters as they move quietly toward the deeper forest, each step swallowed by moss and mud. A boy at the rear carries a basket of tiny darts, each one resting in its own leaf wrapper to keep the tips from rubbing. The elders have decided today is a testing day, a chance to see which mixtures fly truest and which arrows belong in the quiver. You're not sure if you're more excited or terrified, but you keep walking because turning back feels like announcing yourself as prey. The group pauses in a clearing where monkeys chatter noisily overhead, tossing leaves and half-chewed fruit like hecklers at a play. The hunters exchange glances, then crouch, motioning you to do the same. The air is suddenly electric. The arrows are raised, blowguns lifted, and the forest holds its breath. Then, so soft you almost miss it. A monkey shrieks once, then silence. Another leaps, flails, then stills. The rest scatter with panicked cries, vanishing into the green maze. One of the hunters slips forward and retrieves the fallen prey, lifting it carefully as though apologizing to it. The animal will be food, its skin and bones used, its spirit acknowledged with a whispered word. Nothing wasted. Mainstream fact: curare-laced darts work swiftly on small animals, often dropping birds and monkeys within minutes. Larger creatures, tapirs, peccaries, might run some distance before collapsing, but the hunters track them patiently, knowing the poison is already working silently inside. This efficiency made the technique famous across continents once Europeans observed it, though they never truly understood the ritual around it. Quirky tidbit: some groups believed that the first prey taken with a new batch of poison carried an omen. If the animal fell quickly and cleanly, the season promised good hunts. If it suffered or escaped, hunters might adjust their recipes or even perform a cleansing ritual on their tools. Imagine modern hunters blaming bad aim on a batch of unlucky glue. That's the kind of logic that makes sense here. Historians still argue whether these rituals were spiritual safeguards or practical ways to explain the variability of plant chemistry. After all, one vine harvested in dry season may not match one harvested in rainy season, even if they're the same species. But in a world without laboratories, the story is easier to hold on to than the chemistry. You're offered a turn. To your horror and delight, a small blowgun is pressed into your hands, a dart slipped into the mouthpiece. The hunter gestures toward a bird perched on a low branch. You raise the tube, exhale, poof, and the dart arcs wildly, hitting a tree trunk 3 feet short. The bird tilts its head at you, unimpressed, then flies away with a shriek that sounds suspiciously like laughter. The children snicker too. You shrug, bow dramatically, and declare yourself a specialist in tree hunting. The elder takes the same blowgun from you, reloads, and in one breath drops another bird from the canopy. He nods as if to say, "It isn't the gun, it's the lungs." You nod back, humbly accepting that your lungs are better suited for sighing at email than for life in the rainforest. The hunters string their kills on vines and continue. Along the way, you notice one arrow stuck in a branch, quivering slightly, its poisoned tip glistening in the sun. Even without hitting prey, it radiates danger, like a live wire in the forest. You give it a wide berth, stepping carefully. The group pauses again at a stream. They toss in a few leaves, coated lightly with poison, and wait. Within minutes, fish begin to rise sluggishly, stunned by the chemicals diffusing through the water. The hunters scoop them out with baskets, quick and efficient. Dinner multiplies before your eyes. You realize that the same poison that paralyzes monkeys also fills cooking pots, the same way a knife both slices fruit and fends off enemies. Tools here are never one purpose. A boy notices you staring at the fish and grins. "Safe to eat," he says. "Only the gills taste it. Stomach is stronger than death." You blink, thinking of the paradox. That poison can kill one creature, yet be harmless food for another. It feels like a riddle the forest poses daily. As the hunters sling their baskets and head home, you trail behind, your mind buzzing louder than the cicadas. You've just witnessed what outsiders used to call tricks or savagery, but what you see now is quiet efficiency, breath, feather, resin, poison, all converging on survival. The arrows, once drying curiosities, are now tested, proven, real. The blowguns, once awkward in your hands, have shown you their silence is louder than any gunshot. And the forest itself, once just background, now feels like a participant, giving and taking in equal measure. By the time the longhouse appears again through the trees, you're exhausted, not from the walk, but from the weight of what you've seen. Survival here is neither desperate nor dramatic. It's simply practiced, perfected, and passed on, one arrow at a time. The longhouse is alive with a different kind of sound tonight. Not the scrape of arrows or the hiss of boiling pots, but the low murmur of words spoken half into the smoke and half into the ears of those who are meant to remember. You slip inside and take your place near the back, the firelight painting everything in amber. The hunters sit cross-legged, arrows bundled beside them, while the elders lean forward with the gravity of men who carry secrets heavier than spears. You realize this is not about making or testing anymore. This is about guarding, recipes for poison, the chants that accompany the gathering, even the stories of which a vine whispers louder, under which moon. None of these are written. They live only in memory, locked inside human voices, and tonight, those voices are weaving the net tighter. The eldest woman begins with a chant. It isn't loud, it is almost conversational, but every phrase lands heavy, as if each word is a bead on a string, adding weight to the necklace of memory. You can't follow the language completely, but you catch a pattern. The names of plants, the names of animals, the names of ancestors. It is part lullaby, part recipe, part history lesson, disguised as prayer. Mainstream fact. Anthropologists note that many indigenous groups in the Amazon had strict rules about who could learn the recipes for poisons like curare. Often, only shamans or designated elders could handle the full knowledge. Outsiders were rarely allowed to witness the process, and even within a community, secrecy was the best defense against rivals or careless mistakes. The hunters nod along to the chant, some mouthing the words. You notice a boy at the edge trying to copy, his lips forming sounds just a beat too late. His mother nudges him sharply and he looks down. Knowledge is not handed out like candy. It is earned, rehearsed, controlled. You feel the weight of being an outsider here, allowed to watch but not to carry away more than the surface. Quirky tidbit. You hear later that some groups intentionally inserted false recipes into their chants when outsiders were listening. The fake versions used harmless plants that would never kill so much as a beetle. Outsiders would leave feeling clever, thinking they had stolen a secret, only to find their arrows harmless. You imagine European explorers scratching their heads as monkeys laughed at their clumsy efforts. The elder closest to you stirs the smoke with his hand, then begins to speak in a tone even softer than the chant. He talks about a time when rival groups tried to steal poison recipes. Instead of fighting them off with arrows, the elders told children to sing loud songs outside the longhouse, songs full of nonsense words that sounded like instructions. The rivals left, believing they had overheard the ritual, and later discovered they had memorized a recipe for spicy soup instead. The hunters chuckle at the memory. You chuckle too, though nervously, because even jokes here are edged with survival. Historians still argue whether secrecy around poisons was driven more by spiritual belief or by political strategy. Was it fear of angering spirits if the recipe spread too far? Or was it about controlling power within and between groups? Scholars can't agree, and you realize the debate is missing the point. To the people here, both explanations are true at once. Spirit and strategy are never separate. The firelight flickers, casting shadows that seem to dance along the walls. You see painted patterns, snakes, frogs, vines, drawn in soot and ochre. They are not decorations, they are mnemonics, visual cues to help memory travel from one generation to the next. A coiled snake might remind a boy of which plant sap needs to be handled with a stick. A frog might whisper which dartwood pairs best with certain toxins. Every mark is a note in a visual song. One of the hunters reaches for his quiver and lifts an arrow, already poisoned, already feathered. He holds it flat on his palm, tip gleaming faintly. This, he says softly, is more than wood and sap. It is silence. He closes his fist over it, then opens his hand to show the empty palm. The arrow has been passed to another elder, sitting just beside him, with such fluid motion you barely saw it. Everyone nods. The lesson is clear. Silence itself is the sharpest weapon. You lean back, the smell of smoke in your hair, and listen as the chants grow softer. They sound less like teaching now and more like lullabies. A woman croons to a baby in the corner, her melody rising and falling in time with the ritual. And you think this is how knowledge survives, not just in the words of the elders, but in the hum that comforts a child half asleep. You close your eyes and let the sound wash over you. The longhouse is warm, the fire steady, the murmurs hypnotic. For a moment, you almost forget that the chants are about poison. They could be about cooking or weaving or simply loving the forest. Maybe in a way they are. When you open your eyes, the hunters are wrapping arrows in cloth, tucking them away with reverence. The chants fade into silence. The knowledge has been passed along one more night, one more breath, one more heartbeat. And you realize you've just witnessed not a recipe, but a covenant. The night dissolves into morning again, and the longhouse empties into the forest with a quiet rustle of feet and feathered shafts. You're pulled along with the hunters to a clearing that smells of damp earth and crushed leaves. This is not a hunt today, it is training. The children gather in a ring, each carrying a small bow or a stubby blowgun, and the elders set up targets. Banana stalks propped against logs, leaves pinned to bark, fruit hung by vines. The air hums with nervous energy. A boy no older than 7 steps forward, his blowgun nearly as tall as he is. He lifts it with exaggerated seriousness, cheeks puff, and puffed! The dart wobbles out, barely kissing the stalk before tumbling to the dirt. The crowd erupts and giggles. His older sister, smug as only an older sibling can be, steps forward, raises her bow, and sinks an arrow into the fruit with a satisfying thunk. The boy scowls, and the lesson continues. Mainstream fact: across the Amazon, children began practicing hunting skills almost as soon as they could walk steadily. Miniature bows and blowguns were often crafted for them, not as toys but as training tools. By adolescence, their accuracy could rival adults. Ethnographers note that this early start was less about play and more about survival apprenticeship. One of the elders calls a boy forward with a serious expression. He hands him an arrow tipped not with poison, but with a dull wooden point, perfect for practice. The boy nocks it, draws, and lets fly. The arrow sails true, splitting the edge of a banana stalk. A cheer goes up, not loud but warm. The boy beams, and you catch yourself clapping before you remember to be subtle. Quirky tidbit. Some groups once had playful competitions where children shot at dangling bundles of palm leaves or small gourds filled with seeds. When struck, they rattled like maracas, and whoever made the loudest rattle was deemed the monkey catcher. You can almost hear the echoes of that game as the children chase each other now, teasing, daring, and practicing without realizing how much they're learning. Historians still argue whether these games were deliberate training methods or just clever ways to keep children entertained while reinforcing skills. Either way, the result was the same. A generation who could breathe silently into a blowgun or snap a bowstring without hesitation when the forest demanded it. You're handed a small bow yourself, the wood polished but rough in your hands. A child grins at you, daring you to try. You pull back, aim for a banana stalk, and release. The arrow sails sideways and sticks in the dirt with all the menace of a fallen twig. The children burst out laughing so hard one rolls in the mud. You bow dramatically, as if this were exactly your plan. The laughter grows, and the elder shakes his head, muttering something that probably means, "Our guest will not be fed by his own arrows." The training continues, and you notice the seriousness beneath the laughter. A boy whose arrow flies wide is gently corrected, elbow higher, breath slower. A girl who puffs too hard through her blowgun is told to breathe like a snake, not a storm. The advice is poetic, simple, but precise. You think about the years it would take to turn those corrections into muscle memory. The older children practice with real arrows now, tips gleaming faintly in the sunlight. They aim higher, farther, striking leaves pinned to tree trunks. Every hit is greeted with nods rather than cheers. The measure of success here is calm repetition, not noisy triumph. One boy, maybe 12, steps forward with a confidence that makes the younger ones hush. He raises his blowgun, cheeks puff, and pft, the dart sinks cleanly into the hanging fruit. Another pft, another perfect strike. The elder nods gravely and hands him a gourd from yesterday's brew. The boy dabs a dart tip, blows again, and the next fruit shudders, falling limp to the dirt. A murmur runs through the group. The boy is crossing into a new stage. Poison is no longer abstract to him, it is real. You feel a strange mix of pride and unease. The boy grins faintly, but his eyes are serious, as though the weight of what he's learning has landed. Childhood here isn't ended by birthdays. It's ended by the moment when your dart carries not just speed, but silence. Not just accuracy, but consequence. The training winds down with laughter again. Children chase each other, blowguns abandoned for the moment, arrows stacked neatly for tomorrow. The elders watch, arms crossed, nodding to each other. Knowledge has been passed, a little more today than yesterday, and tomorrow it will be passed again. As the sun tilts higher, you sit back, the sounds of giggles, puffed, and thunk echoing around you. You think about your own childhood toys, plastic, breakable, harmless, and wonder what it would have felt like to grow up where every game was also a rehearsal for survival. The forest hums approval, cicadas swelling into chorus, and you realize that even in practice, even in play, the arrows whisper their secret lesson: silence, patience, precision. The practice ground slowly empties, the children running off toward the stream, their laughter trailing like ribbons behind them. You stay with the hunters as they shoulder their quivers and melt back into the forest. At first, you think you're just heading home, but then you notice the deliberate way they pause at each sound, the tilt of a head at a bird call, the stillness when a branch snaps. You realize you are now in another lesson: how to listen. The jungle is not quiet. It is a layered orchestra of sounds: frogs clucking, insects whining, parrots squawking, monkeys gossiping in the treetops. But to the hunters, these are not distractions. They are alarms, a radar system more precise than any satellite. A frog croaks differently when a snake slithers by. A bird's shriek rises when humans approach. Even the cicadas shift pitch before rain. The hunters hear all of this the way you hear a ringtone, each variation a clear signal. One man halts, raises his hand. Everyone freezes. You hear nothing unusual, but the boy beside you whispers, "Hawk!" You look up, squint, and finally spot it, dark wings circling far above. To you, it's just a bird. To them, it's a warning. Hawks mean monkeys will go silent. Monkeys going silent might mean a jaguar is moving. One sound leads to another, the forest speaking in chains of cause and effect. Mainstream fact: ethnographers studying Amazonian peoples have documented how hunters read the forest like text, with each animal call or silence functioning as punctuation. A single missed signal could mean walking straight into a predator or missing a herd of game entirely. The hunters begin moving again, slower this time. You step carefully, trying to imitate their silence, but every twig you brush feels like an alarm bell. The boy shakes his head at you, grinning. He cups his hand to his ear dramatically, mocking your clumsiness, and you have to bite your lip not to laugh out loud. Quirky tidbit: some communities even train dogs to interpret sounds, not just scents. A bark or whine could signal that a jaguar was near, or that capybaras were hiding by the river. The animals became translators, a bridge between the human ear and the forest's gossip. You glance at the scruffy dog trotting at the group's heels and wonder how many languages it speaks. Historians still argue whether this sound literacy was consciously taught or simply absorbed over years of living in the forest. Was it a curriculum or just survival osmosis? Standing here, you suspect it's both. Children imitating their parents' pauses, their sharp turns of the head, until one day the sounds tell them a story they can read without effort. Suddenly, the forest does fall silent. No parrots, no cicadas, no monkeys, just the distant thump of your own heartbeat. The hunters stiffen, their bodies angled like statues. You try to still yourself too, though your lungs insist on wheezing at exactly the wrong moment. A twig snaps in the distance. The silence deepens, pressing against your skin. Then a faint grunt, a peccary herd moving through the underbrush. The hunters relax slightly, danger avoided, opportunity noted. The silence had not been for you, but for prey. You let out a shaky breath, earning another grin from the boy. The group moves on, weaving through ferns and vines. You notice how they occasionally slap their thighs lightly or click their tongues, small signals to each other, almost inaudible, drowned in the forest chatter. A secret language inside a secret language. As the sun climbs higher, the sounds of the jungle swell again. Monkeys resume their gossip. Birds argue overhead. Cicadas buzz with manic energy. You feel the tension in your shoulders ease. The hunters nod, lesson learned. Back at the clearing, the elders sit you down. One taps his ear, then points at your chest. Forest first here, he says, then here. You realize he means that listening is not just with ears, but with patience, with your whole body. You sit in the warmth of the afternoon, replaying the silence, the hawk's shadow, the peccary's grunt. You think about your own world, where silence is rare, filled with hums of machines, chatter of traffic, endless noise. Here, silence is not absence, it is message. You wonder how many messages you've missed in your life, simply because you weren't listening. The hunters rise, brushing off leaves, quivers rattling faintly. The forest hums around you again, alive, awake, a teacher that never tires. You follow, ears straining, trying to catch a single note in the symphony. And for the first time, you feel the edge of comprehension, like catching the rhythm of a song you've never heard, but somehow know you'll learn. You slip down the bank after the hunters, feet sliding in cool silt, and the river greets your shins with a hiss like poured tea. No one speaks. A woman kneels, scoops up gray clay from beneath the water, and smooths it along her forearms, as if she's buttering bread. Another dips a gourd, pours the slurry into a leaf bowl, and nods at you. Message received. Today, you try becoming less visible. You start with your hands. The clay is shockingly cold, a relief against the heat, and it smells like rain trapped in stone. You smear it up your arms, across your neck, over your cheekbones. A boy pats your shoulder and gestures to your ears and the back of your hands, places people forget. He's right. Your ears are the color of a ripe mango. The clay turns them into quiet pebbles. You watch the hunters draw slow stripes along their calves and foreheads, then dust the wet clay with charcoal so it dries to a matte, non-reflective skin. You catch your reflection in the water and try not to laugh. You look like a museum statue attempting stealth. Mainstream fact: across lowland South America, body paints and clays, especially black blue Genipapo from Genipa americana and red Urucum Annatto from Bixa orellana, have long served multiple roles: identity marks, ritual art, mild sun barrier, and, when mixed with ash or oils, a practical insect deterrent. Hunters also use river clay and soot to cut shine and scent, turning skin into shadow and odor into almost nothing. They pass around a small bundle of crushed leaves that smell like pepper and orange peel. Breath, the elder says, tapping his lips. You chew. Your mouth catches fire in a politely alarming way, and your exhale suddenly smells like a tree, not a person. You remember yesterday's lesson about listening and think. Today's the lesson about not being heard or smelled. A woman rubs her hair with smoke from a smudge of damp palm fibers. The scent is sweet, a little like caramel and campfire. Clothes should belong to smoke, she murmurs. You file that under jungle laundry hacks. Quirky tidbit. One hunter claims termites make excellent perfume. He crumbles a small termite nest, lets the soldiers grab his skin with tiny mandibles, and then brushes them off, releasing a sharp, resinous scent. Ant cologne, he jokes, fanning his neck. You decide your current fragrance, Swamp Day Spa, with notes of charcoal and fear, is sufficient. The elder raises a finger. Movement now matters more than color. Walk like a leaf, he says, which you immediately misunderstand. He does not mean drift lazily. He means you move only when the forest moves, when a breeze shakes branches, when parrots shriek, when water slaps a log. You try it, timing your steps to the soft clap of river on roots. It feels ridiculous for 30 seconds. Then it starts to feel like dancing with a partner you can't see. A boy crawls forward on elbows, blowing a slow ribbon of air across the surface to make ripples, then slips his blowgun through ferns. The dart waits at the mouthpiece, a bead of poison gleaming, the only shiny thing allowed. Another hunter shows you how to hide your outline with a fan of palm fronds tied loosely around the shoulders, a jungle version of a ghillie cape. You shrug into one. It rustles far less than you feared, but you still sound like a salad when you move. The boy gives you a sympathetic thumbs up, which is generous. Historians still argue whether elaborate body painting and leaf capes function primarily as social signals, announcing clan, age, and role, or whether their first job was simply camouflage and insect defense that later acquired layered meanings. The archive offers portraits and field notes. The forest offers results. Out here, if the birds ignore you and the mosquitoes complain, the design works. You learn to step onto roots rather than between them. The roots are quiet, the gaps are gossip. You learn to place your foot sideways first, then roll it flat, so a twig that might snap gets tested gently and moved by toes before weight commits. You learn that your elbows and knees should never be the brightest things in a clearing. The clay takes care of color. Your patience takes care of shine. A woman daubs a dot of Jenny Papo on your cheek with a fingertip. Good for biting ones, she says, meaning insects. The juice dries blue-black, cool against your skin, and stays for days. You are now wearing a durable, organic, fairly permanent face note. You imagine explaining at airport security that you leaned into traditional dermatology and expect no eyebrows to be raised at all. When you crouch, a child passes you a strip of bark fiber to bind your calves. "So vines don't say your name," he whispers. The tie keeps loose pants from snagging. He makes a looping knot, 2 circles and a pull that releases instantly with a sharp tug. Your eyes widen, he smirks. Jungle fashion is also jungle engineering. You practice freezing, not a tense superhero freeze, but the kind where your muscles become water poured into the shape of a tree. Breath goes low and narrow. Your eyes scan without your head moving. A dragonfly lands on your shoulder and treats you as furniture. The boy's grin returns. Now you are invisible to at least one teenager of the air. Mainstream fact, the sequel. Ethnographers recorded hunters masking human scent with ash, clay, and plant oils, sometimes even carrying water in the mouth to avoid exhaling warm, odor-laden breath toward prey. The goal wasn't to become odorless, that's impossible, but to become ordinary, to fold human notes into the forest background music. A breeze lifts. Parrots begin their opinion column overhead. The elder raises 2 fingers. Everyone shifts 3 steps, another gust, another 3 steps. When the air stills, the group becomes sculpture again. You listen, really listen, and time your weight transfer to the ripples on the river and the squeak of a distant tree frog. Your shoulders lower, your ankles stop complaining. You are not graceful, but you have migrated from clattery suitcase to forgettable backpack. Progress. Historians still argue whether some of the more theatrical camo practices, full-leaf headdresses, face masks carved like animals, were reserved for ritual hunts or performed more often than the records suggest. Artists love to draw them. Traders love to buy them. Scholars debate how daily they were. The people here do not debate. If it helps today, it's ordinary. If it doesn't, it's festival. The elder finally gestures you toward the waterline, where fish flash like coins beneath the shade. He taps your chin, mouth closed, breath through nose. Don't fog the surface. You lower the blowgun, inhale through your teeth so quietly it feels like a secret, and exhale. Puffed. Your dart dimples the water and vanishes. A heartbeat later, a small fish lists, then goes still. You freeze, shocked. The boy who taught you to move like leaves reaches in, lifts the prize with 2 fingers, and tucks it into a basket he wove this morning. He doesn't cheer. He nods once gravely. You nod back, equally grave, as if you've just signed a treaty. By afternoon, the clay has dried to a comfortable second skin. You smell like smoke and pepper leaves, your hair like a campfire, your arms like a cool riverbank. A thin band of charcoal still rings your wrist from days ago, a reminder of the first lesson about touching saps. You catch sight of your reflection again in the eddy and barely recognize the person crouched there. A little ridiculous, a lot instructed. On the walk back, the elder sums up with 4 words: shine less, move when. You repeat them under your breath until they feel like your own thoughts. The monkey skull rattle sounds softly from behind you, counting steps. The forest approves, or at least tolerates. Either way, you blend, not perfectly, but better. You are learning to be the pause between two leaves. The clay on your skin flakes slightly as you wake, the smell of smoke still clinging to your hair. Today begins not with arrows or blowguns, but with gourds and leaves, things you'd expect to see in a kitchen. The hunters sit around the fire again, though the atmosphere is different. Less intensity, more ease. A woman lifts a gourd filled with cloudy liquid and swirls it carefully. "Medicine," she says, tapping her chest, then pointing at the forest. You lean forward. This is another layer of the secret. Poisons that kill in one dose can, in smaller amounts, heal. One of the men opens a pouch of dried bark, crumbles a piece into boiling water, and the air fills with a smell like bitter chocolate mixed with pine. He explains that the same vine you saw crushed yesterday can be diluted, brewed gently, and used to relax cramped muscles or soothe snake bites. Same plant, two faces, he says. Depends which one you meet. Mainstream fact. Curare derivatives eventually became muscle relaxants in Western medicine, used in surgeries to keep patients still. What began in a clay pot beside a smoky fire now lives in sterile ampoules, injected by doctors who may not realize the recipe was once sung under a forest canopy. The hunters take turns sipping from small leaf cups, their expressions calm. You're offered one. You hesitate but accept, lifting the bitter liquid to your lips. The taste is sharp, earthy, a little numbing. Your tongue tingles, but only for a moment. You imagine trying to explain this at a pharmacy counter. "Yes, I'd like the paralyzing vine tea, please. Family size." Quirky tidbit. One elder insists that curare tea can even cure hiccups. He demonstrates by hiccuping loudly on purpose, then slapping his chest theatrically after a sip. The children laugh, rolling on the floor, and he winks at you. You can't tell if the cure worked, but the performance certainly did. A woman places another leaf packet on the fire. This one crackles, releasing a resinous smoke. She waves it over her child's arms, explaining it wards off fevers. The child squirms, laughing as the smoke tickles. You realize the line between medicine and ritual is as blurred as the smoke itself. There's no neat separation here, only practice refined by memory. Historians still argue whether these poison into medicine practices were deliberate pharmacology or happy accidents. Did generations experiment until they discovered safe doses, or did they interpret visions and myths that guided them? The debate feels hollow as you watch. The truth is simply that it works. A shaman enters then, carrying a bundle of herbs bound with vine fiber. His face is marked with black dye, his eyes distant, as though he's listening to something you can't hear. He sits by the fire and places the herbs directly into the embers. The smoke rises thick and fragrant, filling the longhouse with a sweet heaviness. The hunters lean back, eyes half-lidded, and you feel your own thoughts slow. The shaman explains softly. Strong poison can be curse or blessing. Small poison can be cure. Very small poison can be spirit's door. He touches his temple and then his heart. But always, respect. The word lands heavy. Respect is the border between medicine and murder, between healing and harm. You sip again from the bitter tea, slower this time, and feel warmth spread down your throat, not unpleasant. Around you, people smile faintly, their shoulders loosening. The tension that usually coils around the arrows seems to fade. Tonight, poison is not weapon, it is comfort. Quirky detail. You hear how mothers use diluted sap as a teething rub for babies, numbing the gums just enough to soothe pain. The idea makes you blink hard, imagining what would happen if the dose was wrong. Yet the children here grow strong, proof that knowledge has been passed down correctly, carefully, lovingly. The shaman begins a low hum, joined by the elders, then by the women weaving at the side. The sound vibrates through the clay walls, into your bones. It's not a song of battle, but a balance. You close your eyes, let the hum and the bitter taste mix, and feel the line between danger and healing blur until it's almost comforting. Historians note in dry journals that curare was both pharmacological and ritual, but that flat sentence misses the warmth of this moment. The laughter of children, the shared cup, the hum that feels like a lullaby. You realize that survival here isn't just about arrows and hunts. It's also about making sure a sick child can breathe through the night, that a hunter's cramp eases so he can walk again. Survival has many faces, and not all of them are fierce. The fire cracks, sending sparks upward. You sip the last of your leaf cup, the taste bittersweet now. Around you the forest hums, the people hum, and for once, the poison doesn't frighten you. It soothes. The air near the river grows heavy with the smell of smoke and damp leaves, but tonight the hunters aren't stringing busts or polishing blowguns. Instead, they carry bundles of leaves in woven baskets and gourds sloshing with dark liquid. You follow them to a wide bend in the river, where the water moves slowly, like a lazy serpent basking in the dusk. The elders nod to the children, and the baskets are tipped. Leaves scatter across the surface, spreading into a thin green film. The hunters stir the water with sticks, pushing the leaves outward until they drift in a slow whirlpool. You lean closer and catch the faint bitterness in the air. Something chemical, sharp, a cousin to what you smelled at the poison pots. Mainstream fact: many Amazonian peoples use plant toxins for fishing, especially compounds like rhodinone, extracted from vines such as Lonchocarpus. These substances interfere with fish respiration, stunning them without making them unsafe to eat. For centuries, this method filled baskets quickly, especially in shallow streams where nets or hooks were impractical. At first, the river looks unchanged. Then you notice it, small silver fish wobbling near the surface, as if drunk. A larger one rolls on its side, then rights itself, confused. Soon dozens are rising, sluggish and easy to scoop. Children wade in, laughing, grabbing fish with their bare hands. Women sweep them into baskets with wide leaves, the catch flopping weakly. The river itself seems to be handing over dinner. Quirky tidbit: one man jokes that the fish are dancing with no drum. He wiggles his fingers like a conductor, and the children squeal with laughter as the stunned fish flick their tails in half-hearted rhythm. You smile, imagining an underwater party with no music but plenty of confusion. Historians still argue whether fish poisoning techniques were primarily communal events, feeding whole villages at once, or individual strategies for lean times. Some accounts describe huge gatherings where dozens joined in, while others suggest single families quietly poisoning their stretch of river. Watching tonight, you see both truths. The work is communal, but the catch is divided carefully, each basket balanced between families. You wade in yourself, splashing clumsily. A boy shoves a stunned fish into your hands, and it slaps weakly against your palm before going limp. He laughs at your startled yelp, then demonstrates how to grip behind the gills so it can't wriggle free. You mimic him, nearly dropping it again, and he grins as though you've just passed a very low-level initiation. The hunters haul in larger fish with woven nets, their scales glinting like coins in the fading light. A woman holds one up proudly, the size of her forearm, and declares it will be roasted whole. The children cheer. You realize this isn't just survival, it's also celebration. The forest is given generously, and tonight the longhouse will be full of food and laughter. Someone mentions that the toxins lose power quickly, dispersing harmlessly in the current by morning. The fish that swim past later won't even notice. The river heals itself, an elder says, tapping the surface with a stick. You watch the ripples spread and think about how different this feels from the poisons tipped on arrows. Both come from the same forest, both born of leaves and vines, yet one feeds while the other kills. Survival here is always a choice of how you aim the secret. As baskets fill, the group heads back. The path smells of damp fish and crushed herbs, a strange perfume of abundance. Children trail behind, still giggling, holding the smallest fish like prizes. You glance back at the bend in the river. The leaves continue drifting, the water shimmering with the last light of day. You think of all the streams that must have carried these secrets for centuries, unrecorded, unremarked, except in the memories of those who live here. Back at the longhouse, fires roar. Fish are laid on spits, wrapped in leaves, or tossed onto coals to crackle and sizzle. The air fills with the rich, smoky scent of roasted flesh. You sit among them, chewing carefully on a piece handed to you, the taste fresh, earthy, tinged with smoke. You half expect to feel poison on your tongue, but of course you don't. The fish is safe, delicious, a gift filtered by the river itself. You lean back, belly warm, as the hunters tell stories and the children dance around the fire with fish bones like trophies. For the first time since you arrived, you feel not like a visitor watching secrets, but like a guest invited to share them. You hear the boats before you see them, oars slapping water with the rhythm of people who think rivers are roads you can bully into obedience. The hunters melt into the understory with the ease of smoke finding rafters. You remember the lesson: shine less, move when, and follow, slipping behind a curtain of philodendron leaves. Through a green lattice, you finally glimpse them. Men with beards like moss and shirts the color of storm clouds, their metal buckles flashing sun at every wrong moment. The forest, which usually hums, seems to lean back and watch. They beach the boats awkwardly, boots sinking in the soft bank, voices low but urgent. One man taps a brass object against the gunwale, listening as if the river might answer in a European key. Another holds up a piece of paper with lines on it, your first map in days, and it's sweating as hard as the people holding it. They point inland, then at the canopy, then at each other, arguing over which lump of green is the lump they're looking for. You're tempted to helpfully point out that the lump is the Amazon, but you restrain yourself. You are camouflaged clay and patience, not customer support. The elders around you are statues, except for their eyes. They note which stranger leads, which carries the heaviest pack, which keeps touching his side where a weapon might hang. A boy at your elbow silently counts the oars, the knives, the bracelets, shiny things that can become edges. Beside him, the monkey skull rattle doesn't shake. Silence is still the sharpest weapon. One of the strangers kneels, scoops water, and tastes it like a critic. Another holds up a glittering strand, glass beads, and lets them fall through his fingers with theatrical clinks. The smallest vibrations reach you, an accidental alarm. The elder nearest you lifts 2 fingers. Wait. Mainstream fact. Early European chronicles, think mid-16th century expedition logs, through the 18th century writings of Charles Marie de la Condamine and later Alexander von Humboldt, remark again and again on urari, a potent arrow poison carried in little pots and spread like varnish on darts. La Condamine even shipped samples to Europe in the 1740s, and physicians debated them in salons, amazed that meat killed by the poison was edible while the poison itself, swallowed, did nothing at all. The forest had been correct long before the salons caught up. At the waterline, the strangers arranged a display on a blanket. An iron knife, a mirror the size of your hand, needles, a coil of copper wire, and a tin whistle that immediately convinces the local parrots to file a noise complaint. A hunter in your group quirks a smile that says, useful, amusing, dangerous, in that order. Mirrors are for stories and signals. Knives are for everything. Whistles are for annoying birds, and perhaps one curious boy. Was a quirky tidbit. You'll hear later that someone once traded a hat with a feather as big as your forearm for a single macaw tail plume, an upgrade. The elder will joke, 2 feathers replaced by one that knows what it wants to be. Fashion, it turns out, is a robust cross-cultural economy. The strangers clearly know one word in the local tongue. They repeat it loudly, as if volume translates. Amigo, amigo. The elder beside you nods politely to the leaves. Friend is a performance, here is everywhere, measured by how gently one steps on riverbanks and how quietly one fingers a knife. A hunter inches forward, visible enough to be seen but shaded enough to be safe. He lifts an empty blowgun and, with deliberate ceremony, slides a dart that carries no poison. He turns, aims at a broad banana leaf near the stranger's feet, and lets out a whisper of breath. Paw. The leaf shudders, a clean hole appearing as if punctured by an idea. The strangers startle, then clap, half admiration, half calculation. The elder lowers the tube, smiling the way you smile at a neighbor's dog that could remove a finger but is choosing not to. They trade, of course. The mirror goes first, because who doesn't want to meet their own face in the forest? Then needles, which will sew baskets and skin, copper, which will become hooks and ornaments, a knife, which will live a dozen lives before it dulls. In return, the strangers receive feathers, a carved gourd, and a bundle of darts that are absolutely, emphatically, intentionally unpoisoned. The lesson from the Longhouse returns. Secrets travel wrapped in decoys. Historians still argue whether these first exchanges were mostly peaceful barter or more often tense negotiations shadowed by ambush. Some chronicles paint Eden, others a maze of threats. Truth likely rhymes with both, subtle shows of force, quick kindnesses, and everyone learning each other's edges faster than they learn names. They also debate the word itself, whether curare came from a Korib or Tupi root meaning he to kill, he who kills, or something far less dramatic that European ears romanticized. In the forest, the term is simple, the pace that asks breath to forget. The strangers point to the blowgun and then to their own chests, miming breath and aim. The hunter hesitates, then hands the tube to the boldest man, a leader by volume if nothing else. He lifts it, inhales too sharply, and sneezes into the mouthpiece, producing a sound like a deflating accordion. The children in your group manage to keep straight faces for 3 seconds, then collapse, giggling. You bite your lip hard enough to taste clay. The elder bows slightly to the stranger, as if to say, "Your lungs are very enthusiastic. May they live long and prosper." Jokes surface, gentle, like fish after leaves. A woman behind you whispers that the newcomer's shirts must be made of fog. Why else would they always look wet? Another points at the boots and asks whether they are baskets that forgot to be baskets. You try very hard not to add that the map looks like it's really a napkin with ambitions. Yet no one here forgets the sharpness beneath the smile. While trade happens, 2 hunters drift into the trees to your left, 2 to your right. Angles are covered, exits stay open. When a stranger reaches reflexively toward an arrow shaft to examine the fletching, a hunter's palm appears between hand and poison with a polite firmness that translates across any language. Look, don't touch. One of the bearded men gestures toward a small animal in their boat, trussed and wide-eyed, a peccary piglet, probably caught in a snare. He mimes release, then points inland, then at the sky as if to say, "Freedom, goodwill, we're the sort of people who return small pigs." The elder nods, unties the animal, and it bolts into the understory so fast it becomes a rumor. Everyone pretends not to track where it went. The message is logged. Gestures matter. Also, the pig will absolutely tell on them to the rest of the herd. A different stranger holds up a small bottle and a feather, makes a pouring motion toward the dart tips, and raises his eyebrows. A question about recipes with all the subtlety of a parade. The elder smiles, takes the feather, fans himself, and offers the man a perfectly blank piece of bark. The joke is bilingual. Secrets are still secrets. Mainstream fact, the sequel. By the 18th and 19th centuries, Europeans tried to purchase or coerce recipes outright. Samples arrived in London and Paris sealed in gourds. Chemists argued over solvent extractions. Surgeons imagined arrows that could be measured. Some breakthroughs were real. Many early formulations failed because plant species were misidentified or batches had been cleverly edited by the sellers. The rainforest kept its peer review tight. As the sun tips downward, trade winds into farewell. The strangers pack their glittering things, stow their curiosity with their oars, and push back into the current. One turns to wave, and a shaft of light catches his mirror, scattering a bright coin of sun into the canopy. A pair of macaws squawk, offended at the competition. The boats drift away, smaller with each stroke, their map still a question mark. Only when they're far enough to be stories does the elder rise fully from the leaves. The hunters step out of green like punctuation emerging from a page. One boy finally shakes the monkey skull rattle, a soft, approving roar that you've come to recognize as we handled that without anyone forgetting manners. The elder turns to you and taps his temple, then his chest. See, he murmurs, spirit and strategy. You track the last ripples of the oars until they smooth into ordinary river. The forest exhales. Birds resume their editorials. Someone chuckles about the sneeze. Someone else pockets a needle with the careful pride of a person who just acquired 100 future stitches. You realize you witnessed a hinge in a long door. Contact not as thunder, but as careful choreography. Display, humor, distance, and the refusal to let a single secret slip. As you walk back, a boy hands you the tin whistle the strangers left behind. Payment for feathers, perhaps, or a polite mistake. You raise it to your lips, consider the parrots, and tuck it quietly into your pouch. The Amazon already has enough opinions. That evening, the longhouse hums with a different kind of energy. Not the quiet work of feathers or the solemn chants of secrecy, but the restless curiosity that comes after outsiders leave. You sit among the hunters as they spread their new treasures across the floor. A knife with a blade that flashes like lightning when it catches the firelight. A coil of copper wire glowing red in the embers, and the infamous tin whistle that children now fight over like it's the crown of the forest. The elders handle each object slowly, weighing them as though their value isn't in their shine but in their future usefulness. The knife is admired most. One man presses the edge gently against a shaft of wood. It slices so cleanly he smiles despite himself. Sharp like the river after rain, he says. They all nod. A knife means faster arrow making, easier skinning, cleaner cuts of meat. It is not just a tool, but time saved, energy spared. Mainstream fact: European trade goods, especially iron knives, beads, mirrors, and cloth, were prized in many Amazonian communities. Metal edges replaced stone or bone, drastically changing the speed of tasks. Traders often misunderstood how quickly these goods became essential, sometimes assuming their value lay in novelty rather than genuine utility. The copper wire draws less enthusiasm, though one boy immediately winds it around his wrist like a bracelet. It glints in the firelight, a small sun caught on skin. The elders let him play, but later will probably reshape it into fishhooks or lashings. Utility always wins eventually. Quirky tidbit: you hear a whispered joke about mirrors. One elder claims that when mirrors first appeared, some people thought they showed not just your face but your other face. the spirit twin that lives behind you. Another jokes that mirrors steal part of your breath each time you look. You glance at the shiny square lying on the mat and decide to admire it only in passing. Losing your breath is already too easy in this forest. Historians still argue whether indigenous peoples traded for these goods simply out of pragmatic advantage, or whether symbolic meanings attach quickly. Were beads just pretty, or did they become charms? Was cloth only fabric, or did new patterns inspire new rituals? The debate continues, while the evidence, like the laughter over that whistle, suggests it was both. The children return to squabbling over the whistle. One finally wins, puts it to his lips, and blows. The sound is shrill, metallic, out of tune with the forest. A parrot immediately shrieks back in indignation, and the longhouse erupts in laughter. The elder shakes his head, takes the whistle, and tucks it into a pouch. "Good for birds," he says dryly, "not for people." But the most serious exchange of the night isn't about whistles or knives. It happens when one stranger dared earlier to hint about recipes, the feather dipped in poison, the mind-pouring motion. The hunters are still chuckling over how they gave him nothing but a blank piece of bark. One man reenacts the gesture, fanning himself theatrically with the recipe. The room laughs again. Still, beneath the humor is steel. They speak in low tones about how outsiders crave the secrets of the vines, how they try to buy what should only be earned. "They think poison is a thing," one elder says, tapping his chest, "but it is a song you must learn slowly. If you sing it wrong, it kills you first." Heads nod. The room is suddenly quiet. Mainstream fact, the sequel. 17th and 18th century traders often obtained curare in sealed gourds, but failed to reproduce it reliably. Without the exact plants, proportions, and procedures, many of which varied seasonally, they ended up with mixtures that were weak or useless. The true recipes remained elusive until much later, and even then, much of the traditional knowledge was never fully shared. Quirky tidbit. One story claims that a clever elder once sold gourds filled not with poison, but with thick syrup made from boiled palm fruits. The buyers, convinced they had secured deadly curare, tested it on prey, only to end up with very sticky arrows and very unimpressed monkeys. You can almost hear the roar of laughter echoing from the forest when the tale reached home. Historians still argue whether indigenous leaders intentionally used such decoy trades as political strategy, buying time while keeping real secrets safe. Watching tonight, you don't doubt it. Secrecy isn't just defense, it's leverage. The elders closed the discussion by wrapping the knife in palm leaves, placing it carefully beside the arrows. Not mixed in with them, not hidden away, just waiting, an ally rather than a master. They don't need to be told what outsiders never seem to understand. Tools come and go, but knowledge, guarded and sung, outlives them all. You lie back as the fire dies, watching sparks drift into the rafters like stars fleeing gravity. The copper wire glows faintly red in the embers. The mirror faces down on the mat, the whistle muffled in a pouch. The forest outside hums as though nothing has changed. Maybe it hasn't. The knives will dull, the copper will corrode, but the arrows and the poisons, the songs in people's chests, those remain. The fire burns low the next night, but the voices rise higher. Tonight is not for teaching children to shoot or for boiling vines into black paste. Tonight is for stories, the kind that ripple between laughter and shivers, stories that belong to the longhouse as much as the smoke does. You lean back, clay still faint on your arms, and listen as the elders speak of poisons that do more than kill. They transform, confuse, even promise eternity. One man begins with a tale of a hunter who smeared his darts not just with curare, but with frog venom. The milky sweat scraped carefully from the back of a bright, tiny creature. He said the frog gave him part of its spirit, the elder says, eyes glinting in the firelight. When he ran, he could leap farther. When he aimed, he saw straighter. But when the frog was gone, so was his strength. The listeners nod. Power borrowed is never free. Mainstream fact. Certain Amazonian groups have indeed used frog secretions, such as from the giant monkey frog, Philomedusa bicolor, in hunting rituals. While not typically for arrow poison, the secretion, sometimes called kambo, was applied to burns on the skin, causing intense purging and hallucinations. It was believed to sharpen senses and cleanse the body, though scientists now note it contains bioactive peptides with real physiological effects. Another story follows, this one about a shaman who brewed a poison so strong it did not just stop hearts, it trapped spirits. His enemies, struck by his arrows, were said to wander forever in dreams, unable to wake, caught between breath and silence. Some listeners chuckle uneasily, others cross their arms. You sense this tale as half warning, half entertainment, like ghost stories told at a campfire. Quirky tidbit. One woman chimes in with a laugh. My grandfather said poison arrows made by twins worked twice as well because the spirits couldn't decide which sibling to follow. The group erupts in gentle laughter. Someone else adds that if the twins argued while making the poison, the darts would fly crooked. You grin. Apparently even the supernatural can't resist sibling rivalry. Historians still argue whether such myths arose to explain unpredictable hunts. Sometimes arrows struck cleanly, other times prey escaped despite being poisoned. Were spirits blamed when chemistry faltered, or did belief shape perception of the results? Scholars debate in articles. Here, the stories simply live on, useful whether or not they're true. The shaman raises his hand, and the chatter quiets. He speaks slowly, his words rolling like distant thunder. Poison's not always death. Sometimes it is life. He gestures to a pot simmering at the side, tea brewed from the same vine you watched beaten and boiled days ago. In small sips, it relaxes muscles, eases pain, even brings visions. One drop, he says, and you dream of ancestors. 2 drops, and you dream of gods. 3, and you dream forever. The listeners murmur in appreciation, a ripple of awe and warning combined. Children press closer to their mothers as though leaning into safety while still straining to hear. Someone adds another tale, almost mischievous. A hunter who dipped his darts too shallowly, barely wetting the tips. The arrows failed to kill, but the animals struck were said to forget fear for a day, wandering unafraid of humans. The bravest monkeys we ever saw, the storyteller says, grinning. Everyone burst into laughter at the absurd image of monkeys marching boldly through camp, stealing fruit with no sense of danger. The humor fades into quiet again as another elder speaks of immortality. He tells of a legendary archer who dipped his own lips in poison. Not enough to kill, but enough to mark him. He said the spirits would never let him die. The elder explains. And for years he didn't. He hunted stronger, healed faster, lived longer than anyone expected. But in the end, when he finally fell, they say even the forest refused to take him. His body did not rot, and no vines would cover him. The listeners sit in silence, half believing, half smiling. You shiver, unsure whether to laugh or bow your head. The fire crackles. A frog croaks outside, and the stories linger in the smoke. You realize that these myths aren't just entertainment. They are frameworks for understanding the razor's edge between life and death, medicine and poison, spirit and silence. They remind everyone that survival is never just physical. It is also imagination, respect, and sometimes fear. As the night deepens, a child falls asleep against your shoulder, warm and heavy. You look down at his clay-smeared cheek and wonder what stories he will tell decades from now, what myths he will add to the longhouse hum. For now, you close your eyes and let the words swirl like smoke around you. Tales of frogs that grant leaps, arrows that steal dreams, twins whose quarrels bend flight. You don't need to decide whether they're real. Here, in the Amazon, stories are as real as vines and as vital as breath. Morning comes soft, with smoke still curling from the cooking fires and the chatter of women weaving mats in the open air. Today, the men sit a little apart, polishing arrows, while the women gather around baskets and clay pots. You settle near them, curious. You've watched men crush vines and stir poison, but now you see another half of the secret. How knowledge is carried not only in chants and hunts, but in hands that weave, stir, and teach between everyday tasks. One woman pulls a basket close and begins plucking fibers from a palm frond, stripping them into thin threads. As she works, she tells a story to a girl beside her about her grandmother who once treated a fever with a leaf boiled too long. "It worked too well," she says with a chuckle. "He slept for 2 days straight." The girl laughs, repeating the punchline like a favorite song. Lesson tucked in laughter, woven like fiber into memory. Mainstream fact. Ethnographers have documented that women often carried key knowledge of plant uses, including which toxic saps could be diluted for medicine, which were safe to handle in weaving, and which must be avoided during pregnancy. While men hunted with poisoned arrows, women's domain of knowledge ensured families survived daily illnesses and accidents. A mother dips a bundle of fibers in dye made from urucum seeds. The red stains her fingers, vivid and earthy. As she works, she explains quietly to her daughter which berries stain harmlessly and which are better left on the branch. Her voice is low, but you notice the girl nodding intently, as though every word might someday mean the difference between sickness and healing. Quirky tidbit. One child pipes up that a frog once licked his mother's hand while she was grinding seeds. The whole group burst into laughter. The frog wanted to learn too, and aunt jokes, wagging a finger at him. The story is retold twice, with extra frog details added each time until even the quietest women are shaking their heads and smiling. You realize that humor is a vessel for memory as much as stories or chants. Historians still argue whether the deeper lore of poisons was kept exclusively by male hunters and shamans, or whether women's knowledge of plants was equally central. Some records overlook women almost entirely. Others reveal how wives and mothers preserved the nuances of dosage, preparation, and safe handling. Watching here, it is obvious. Survival is collective, and the secrets live in many hands. An older woman lifts a basket half finished, its weave intricate, patterned with dark and light fibers. "Look," she tells a girl, "see how this strand must cross twice, not once. If you cross once, the basket breaks." Then she adds, "Like poison, too little, useless, too much, danger." The girl repeats the phrase solemnly. You see the connection? Baskets and arrows, weaving and brewing, skills taught with the same metaphors, the same rhythm of care. Nearby, two women pound cassava, their wooden pestles thumping a rhythm that feels like a drum beat. One pauses, wipes sweat, and mutters something about the root that carries two faces. She means cassava's cyanide compounds, deadly if raw, nourishing when properly processed. The children nearby don't flinch. They've heard this their whole lives. You're the only one who realizes the poetry and peril wrapped in the same plant. The baby in the corner fusses. His mother dips a finger into a gourd of diluted resin and rubs it gently on his gums. He quiets instantly, eyes wide, thumb tucked into his mouth. You feel your jaw drop, then remember last night's lesson. Small poison can be cure. The mother glances at you and smiles knowingly. This is not carelessness. It is skill, precision, legacy. Quirky tidbit. One grandmother insists on whispering the name of the plant 3 times whenever she applies a remedy, claiming the spirit of the plant listens better that way. Another teases her, asking if the plants also complain when she forgets their names. The laughter that follows is easy, affectionate, woven into the rhythm of the morning. As the sun climbs, you see that baskets are finished, mats rolled, fibers dyed, and pots simmering with food. Yet alongside those tasks, dozens of small lessons have been passed quietly. When to use a sap, when to avoid a vine, how to weave strength into weakness. Knowledge handed down not in ceremony, but in the ordinary pulse of daily life. Historians may never find these lessons in archives, but you're watching them happen. A girl tugging fibers learns which plants stain her hands. A boy chasing chickens overhears the joke about frogs and poisons. A baby soothes his gums on diluted resin. And the longhouse hums with laughter, stories, warnings, all disguised as conversation, but all survival disguised as play. You realize then that arrows may fly from men's hands, but much of the secret of poison, its uses, its limits, its balance, lives in the weaving of women, the songs of mothers, the teasing of grandmothers. Without them, the arrows would still pierce, but they would not carry wisdom. You wake to a strange chorus at the edge of camp, not human voices, but a rising swell of croaks, trills, and whistles. The hunters are already moving toward the sound, and you follow, curious. They kneel by a patch of damp earth where tiny frogs cling to leaves like jeweled beads. Some glow green, others orange, some patterned like a child's paint set spilled across a pebble. A man crouches, gently coaxing one into a gourd with a leaf. He doesn't touch it barehanded. He explains that certain frogs teach humans how to make arrows stronger, not because their bodies will be smeared directly on the tips, that's dangerous, rare, but because their existence reminds hunters that the forest itself invents poisons every day. Mainstream fact: several South American peoples, though more famously in Central America, learned from poison frogs. The bright skins of Phyllobates species secrete batrachotoxin, one of the most lethal substances known. In some Amazonian regions, frog toxins weren't the primary arrow poisons, but shamans observed them, experimented cautiously, and sometimes incorporated their lessons into ritual practice. You lean closer, watching one frog inflate its throat and release a sharp trill. The sound seems too large for such a tiny body. A boy giggles and whispers, "That one sings to warn you." The more it sings, the more bitter it is. You blink. Was that science or myth? Likely both. Quirky tidbit. An elder says that hunters once tied a live frog to a stick and let its skin touch arrow tips briefly. The frog was released afterward, considered too sacred to harm, but the darts carried a faint gleam of its power. Some swore those arrows flew truer, even if the poison came more from belief than biology. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread reality or mostly legend passed along by travelers eager to impress. Some accounts exaggerate, claiming entire armies armed their darts with frog venom. Others dismiss the idea as fantasy. The truth, like the frog itself, probably sits somewhere in the mud. Hard to see unless you crouch low and listen. The hunters now watch snakes. A vine snake slides through the branches, its green body so perfectly camouflaged, you only notice it because someone points. They murmur about how its venom paralyzes small birds, how its strike is swift but not always fatal. They explain that sometimes by studying animals, how they kill, how they hunt, Humans find their own recipes. One hunter imitates the frog's trill, another mimics the snake's sudden strike, and the children laugh, trying to copy both. You can't resist croaking too, badly, earning more laughter. For a moment, the forest feels like a classroom of comedians, each sound both entertainment and reminder. Nature is teacher, but also clown. Mainstream fact, the sequel. Scientists today recognize that indigenous knowledge of venoms was often built by close observation of animal behavior. If a snake could paralyze quickly, its venom hinted at compounds worth exploring. If a frog's skin deterred predators, perhaps it carried secrets. Many modern drugs trace their roots back to these same observations, though the credit often bypasses the original teachers. The hunters point to the ants marching in long, relentless lines across a log. Some groups once used the bites of certain ants in initiation rituals, teaching endurance and respect. Here, though, they mention how crushed ants can be added to pastes, not as poison but as irritants, making wounds burn, distracting enemies. Even the smallest creature has its role. Quirky tidbit. One boy insists that jaguars taught people how to stalk. Step soft, breathe quiet, wait long. He demonstrates with exaggerated tiptoes, tail invisible but implied. The adults grin, not correcting him. After all, it's true enough. Historians still argue whether animal-inspired aerocraft was symbolic, imitating spirits, or practical, copying biology. The answer you suspect is both again. The frog's poison is real, the snake's strike is real, but wrapping those facts in myth makes them easier to remember, easier to respect. As the sun rises higher, the frog's quiet, slipping back into shadow. The snake vanishes into green. The ants continue their endless march. The hunters stand, stretch, and begin to walk back. You glance over your shoulder once more, catching a final shimmer of orange on a frog's back, like a tiny lantern left burning. You realize the lesson isn't just about animals lending their poisons, it's about humility. To survive here, you watch who survives best. The forest writes its instructions in frog skin, snake fangs, ant trails, and jaguar paws. Humans just learn to copy the handwriting. The sun drips down the canopy like honey, and by late afternoon, the longhouse fills with a quieter kind of work. The elders gather the children close, not for play or practice, but for words. Words that bind the poison to memory the way resin binds feathers to shafts. You settle nearby, cross-legged, as a hush falls over the room. Tonight, you sense, is about teaching the invisible rules that keep everyone alive. An elder lifts an arrow, its tip blackened with poison, and holds it high. He does not speak right away. Instead, he waits until every child is watching, eyes wide, body still. Then he says slowly, "This is not a toy. This is not a stick. This is hunger answered and danger warned." The words hang in the air like smoke, thick and serious. Mainstream fact. In many Amazonian communities, knowledge about poison was introduced to children gradually, often through stories and symbolic acts. Boys might practice with dull tips for years before being allowed near the real paste. Even then, the rules were strict. No pointing, no careless handling, always stored properly. One slip could mean disaster. A boy reaches forward, almost touching the arrow. The elder's hand flashes out, firm but not cruel, and presses the boy's wrist back. "Respect," he says. "If you forget, the forest will remind you, and the forest is not gentle." The boy nods solemnly, cheeks pink with embarrassment. Quirky tidbit. One woman laughs softly and recalls when her own brother once hid a dart behind his ear, pretending it was a feather ornament. His hair brushed the tip, and he fainted within minutes. He survived, barely, but he became a cautionary story retold for generations. The children giggle nervously. You can tell they'll remember that story long after the laughter fades. Historians still argue whether the strict taboos around poison were primarily practical safety rules or deeply spiritual laws. Was it simply about preventing accidents, or was poison believed to carry a spirit of its own, demanding reverence? Listening now, you see how inseparable those explanations are. The taboo keeps fingers safe, but it also keeps respect alive. The elders continue, now with chants. Not the secret brewing chants whispered in smoke, but simpler refrains meant for young ears. They list the names of vines, trees, animals, not as recipes, but as reminders. The children repeat them in sing-song voices, like multiplication tables for survival. You catch the rhythm. One vine for sleep, one vine for strength, one vine for silence. A girl pipes up with a question. What if someone takes the poison for play? The longhouse falls silent. The elder lowers the arrow, then speaks in a voice that carries no humor. Then the poison plays with them, and the poison always wins. The girl shivers and leans into her mother. Lesson received. The mothers add their voices now, reminding the children that poison is not only weapon, but also medicine when handled with care. They tell how small drops ease pain, how teas soothe fevers, but how the same drop carelessly measured can silence breath forever. The children fidget, listening hard. It's not the first time they've heard these words, but repetition is the anchor that keeps knowledge from drifting away. You notice that the teaching isn't all fear, it's also pride. A young boy beams when his grandfather praises him for remembering which feather goes with which shaft. A girl straightens her back when her aunt says she already ties knots like a grown woman. Respect is heavy, but it comes with belonging. Quirky tidbit. One grandmother claims that the spirit of poison punishes arrogance. She tells of a hunter who boasted too loudly about how many monkeys he could kill. The next day his dart backfired, falling into the fire and burning him badly. Whether true or not, the children gasp at the image, their faces lit by the flames. You smile, thinking of modern parents telling ghost stories to keep kids from wandering too far. Some things never change. The chants slow, and the lesson ends with silence. The arrows are bundled and set aside, out of reach. The children curl against their mother, yawning, while the elders sit taller, their duty fulfilled once more. You sense that these nightly teachings are as important as hunts or feasts. Without them, the arrows would still fly, but the hands holding them would forget respect. Historians might write, the community preserved knowledge through oral tradition. But you see more than that. You see how every pause, every stern glance, every laugh folded into warning, every chant repeated 3 times, all of it is the real curriculum. The forest may provide vines and frogs, but people provide memory. The fire pops, sparks rising like glowing insects. The longhouse breathes as one, steady, content. And you realize you've just watched survival being passed from one generation to the next. Not as formula, but as story, song, and solemn promise. The rains return with their usual drama, pouring down in sheets so thick the forest feels like it's underwater. The roof of the longhouse drums like 1,000 rattles, and everyone crowds inside. Instead of heading out to hunt, the hunters gather near the fire, arrows stacked neatly beside them. You sense another kind of lesson brewing. This one about what happens when poison fails. An elder lifts an arrow and holds it close to the flames so its lacquered tip gleams. Sometimes, he begins, the poison is not enough. The children lean forward. You do too. He explains how an animal struck may still run, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for miles. The arrow begins the chase, he says, but your patience finishes it. Mainstream fact. Curare-tipped arrows often paralyze prey, but not always instantly. Larger animals like tapirs or peccaries might stagger for some time before collapsing. Hunters needed to track carefully, often reading subtle signs like bent grass or faint hoof marks. The poison worked, but the forest always added distance. One man tells of a jaguar that was struck but managed to vanish into the green, silent as smoke. For hours they trailed it, listening for the faint rustle of leaves, until finally they found it stretched beneath a tree, breathing shallow, eyes still alert but body frozen. "It watched us," the man says softly, but could not move. The listeners shift uncomfortably. The forest edge is always sharpest when the prey is a predator. Quirky tidbit. Another hunter admits sheepishly that once he lost a poisoned arrow entirely, shot it, missed, and couldn't find it in the undergrowth. Months later, while collecting wood, he stumbled across the same shaft stuck in a tree, still dangerous, the tip dark and sticky. He laughed at himself, but the moral was clear. Arrows don't always kill what they meet, but they never forget what they carry. Historians still argue whether stories of lost, poisoned arrows were warnings or exaggerations. Could toxins really last intact for months in the humid jungle? Some researchers say yes, resins preserve potency surprisingly well. Others claim these tales are metaphors, reminders that carelessness lingers longer than you expect. Sitting here, you're inclined to believe both. Furathrice. The rain hammers louder, and the hunters keep speaking, trading stories like currency. One mentions how wounded animals sometimes lead hunters into dangerous places, thickets hiding snakes or cliffs where footing slips. The poison wins, he says, but it asks for patience as payment. Another explains that sometimes the prey dies in water, swept downstream, and the real hunt becomes retrieving it before the river carries it away. A boy pipes up, asking what happens if a rival finds the animal first. The room quiets. The elder replies, "Then your arrow feeds another mouth." No anger in his voice, just fact. The forest does not keep score, it only balances. The conversation shifts to antidotes. One woman recalls how a hunter once scraped his own arm with a poisoned dart. He survived because his companion smeared the wound with a mash of specific leaves, then forced him to drink water until he vomited. "We called it the forest mercy," she says. The group nods, though a shadow of unease lingers. Mercy, after all, isn't guaranteed. Quirky tidbit. Someone jokes that dogs trained to sniff out wounded animals sometimes refuse to track prey hit with poison. Too easy, they would seem to say, flopping down and ignoring commands. The room laughs, agreeing that even dogs dislike predictable endings. Historians still argue whether antidotes for curare truly existed or were mostly ritual attempts to save the unlucky. Some plants may have slowed the effects, others probably offered false hope. But the fact that communities told and retold antidote stories shows how deeply the fear of accidents lived alongside the usefulness of poison. The rain softens at last, turning from roar to patter. The hunters lean back, arrows beside them, voices lower now. They have spoken not just of triumphs, but of failures, animals that escaped, arrows lost, poison that did not work as expected. And you realize that survival here isn't about certainty. It's about knowing that even secrets fail, and preparing for the silence that follows. A child yawns and curls against his mother's side, eyelids heavy. The elder sets the arrow back down, tip gleaming faintly in the firelight. "The forest wins sometimes," he murmurs, "but so do we." The lesson ends, not with drama, but with rain dripping from the eaves and the smell of damp earth curling into the longhouse. You sit back, heartbeat slower, thinking of arrows lost in trees, jaguars frozen but staring, rivers that carry prey away. Nothing here is guaranteed, and yet everything is remembered. The rain has washed the world clean, leaving the air sharp with the smell of wet leaves and river mud. The hunters move quietly at dawn, blowguns slung across their backs, arrows wrapped in leaves like sleeping snakes. You are invited to follow, not to a field for practice this time, but deeper, towards something bigger, a real hunt. Your heart thuds, half from excitement, half from dread. The path narrows until you're pushing through ferns taller than your shoulders. The hunters slow, hands raised for silence. You imitate them, though your breath sounds thunderous in your own ears. Ahead, you glimpse movement, a herd of peccaries rooting through the undergrowth, dark bodies shifting like a single shadow. The smell reaches you, musky, sharp, the scent of wild pigs with tempers. Mainstream fact: peccaries are a major game animal in the Amazon. They travel in herds, can weigh over 30 kilograms, and are notoriously aggressive when threatened. Hunters using poison-tipped darts favored them, since even one or two animals brought down meant meat for many families. But a careless approach could end with the hunter trampled or bitten. The elder signals with 2 fingers. 2 hunters fan left, 2 right. You crouch low, clutching a blowgun that feels like a stranger in your hands. The herd grunts, oblivious, tearing at roots. Then, pff, a dart whispers into the air, finding a flank. Another follows, then another. The herd erupts in chaos, squeals splitting the forest. They scatter, crashing through leaves, hooves pounding like drums. One peccary bolts past you, eyes wide, foam at its mouth. You freeze, every instinct screaming to run, but your feet hold. The animal stumbles, legs stiffening, then collapses 10 paces away. Breath catches in your throat. You've just seen poison do its work. Not instant, not theatrical, but quiet, inevitable. Quirky tidbit. One hunter whispers that peccaries carry gossip in their hooves. He means their stampedes alert every animal nearby that danger stalks. If a herd flees, monkeys hush, birds scatter, even snakes slide away. Hunting them is like setting off a forest-wide alarm that everyone knows how to interpret. Historians still argue whether poison alone was the decisive factor in these hunts, or whether skill and tracking mattered more. Some accounts describe animals dropping within minutes. Others note that hunters might trail them for hours. Outsiders love the drama of magic poison, but inside the forest, hunters knew patience was as critical as chemistry. The herd vanishes, leaving behind broken leaves and a faint silence. Then, a low whistle from the left. A hunter appears, holding a downed peccary by its hind legs. Another follows, dragging a second. The animals breathe no longer, their bodies already claimed for food. The hunters smile, brief and tired, and set to work with knives, iron ones now, sharp and quick. You watch as they gut the animals neatly, avoiding the poisoned areas. The meat is safe, the poison localized. Steam rises from the open bodies, mixing with the damp air. The smell is thick, metallic, mingling with the earthy scent of leaves. One boy tugs at your sleeve, pointing to a patch of earth torn by hooves. "See," he whispers, "they tell us where they went." He traces the line of prints with a stick, showing you how to read their story. One stumbled, one veered, one fell. Tracking here isn't optional, it's half the hunt. The carcasses are wrapped in leaves, tied with vines, and slung onto poles. The hunters hoist them easily, muscles smooth with practice. You stumble trying to lift one corner and nearly fall into the mud. The men laugh, not unkindly. One claps your shoulder. "Forest heavy," he says with a grin, "but we are heavier." As you march back, the weight of the morning settles on you. You've seen poison move from vine to pot to arrow to animal. Each step patient, each step precise. It doesn't roar like a gun, doesn't flash like fire. It whispers, waits, and delivers. Back at the longhouse, the women are ready with fires and knives. Children crowd close, eager for roasted meat. The hunters lay the carcasses down with care, almost reverence. You notice that before the first cut, the elder pauses, presses his palm to the animal's head, and whispers thanks. A simple act, but it lingers with you. Survival here is not victory, it is relationship. As smoke rises and meat crackles on the fire, laughter fills the air again. Children gnaw on scraps. Hunters share stories of near misses, and women tease them for the ones that got away. The poison remains in the background, silent but central, like a guest who sits quietly at the table while everyone else eats. You chew your share slowly, the taste rich, smoky, layered with the weight of everything you've seen. Tonight, you aren't just fed by the forest, you're fed by secrets that stretch back generations, and you realize that in this place, every bite carries history. Twilight folds the village into soft blues, and the longhouse becomes a lantern, its walls breathing out a low glow, its roof a drumskin for distant rain. Tonight the elders call for quiet, but not the stern quiet of rules or the prickly hush of secrecy. This is a listening quiet, the kind that opens the door in your chest. You settle near the hearth, and the baby with the solemn eyes, yes, the one who once tasted teething medicine from a leaf, blinks at you as if to say, pay attention, this is the good part. A woman begins to hum. It isn't a performance, it's a path. The melody loops with the ease of a cradle rocking. Words join, and you realize you've heard some of them before. Plant names, moon names, the river's nicknames, except now they arrive with tiny hinges. A rhyme for when to cut bark, a cadence for how long to stir a pot, a rise and fall that marks which leaf hides the bite and which leaf hides the balm. You don't hear a recipe so much as a map whose roads are verbs. Mainstream fact: across Amazonian communities, practical knowledge is frequently set to rhythm. Work songs for paddling, weeding, pounding cassava, even for timing stages of cooking or brewing. Ethnographers have recorded lullabies that double as mnemonics, slipping instructions about seasons, dosages, and taboos into melodies easy enough for a child to echo before they can write their name. Songs are vaults with cradle locks. The shaman doesn't sit apart tonight. He leans into the hum, then adds a counterline so soft you feel it more than hear it. Children drift in rings around the fire, tracing circles in dust with toes. The tin whistle, the one you prudently retired, is nowhere in sight. Only voices, wood smoke, and a rattle keeping time in a hand so small it's more seed than fist. You sense the trick now. Knowledge isn't hidden by being obscure, it's hidden by being ordinary. Good luck stealing something that sounds like bedtime. Quirky tidbit. An ant leans toward you and whispers, half proud, half amused, that one of their poison songs includes 3 completely fake lines, decoys for curious ears. If a stranger hums those back, everyone knows what not to share. It's security through lullaby. You grin and nearly laugh out loud, then swallow it politely because laughing at bedtime is how you lose bedtime privileges. Your ear begins to sort the code. Verse 1 favors the rainy months. Its rhythm long and pooled, reminding hands to cut vines when water fattens them. Verse 2 clicks like dry leaves, a reminder that resin thickens faster in heat and attitude. A soft chant slips between stanzas like a needle, stitching caution to method. Don't touch with skin, don't wipe on cloth, don't trust a quiet pot. You could carry these rules in a sack of bark and lose them. Sung, they travel in marrow. Historians still argue whether these songs are primary sources of instruction or simply memory aids wrapped around teaching done elsewhere. Are the verses the manual or just the highlight reel you hum while you work? Sitting here, you think the debate misses the point. A melody that arrives at the right moment is not a summary. It is a hand reaching out from yesterday to steady the day. The fire sighs. The melody turns playful. A call and response begins between the older children and the elders. Who guards the sleeping gourd? The leaf that listens. Who counts the drops? The feather that doesn't drip. The answers are metaphor on purpose. If a rival memorizes them, they've learned poetry, not procedure. You tap your knee in time and catch yourself smiling. Somewhere in your skull, the road the song is laying down keeps going even when the singing stops. A grandmother starts a lullaby so gentle you almost slide off your seat. The first lines sound like any cradle song, moon, bird, river, but then the river's name becomes a measure. 5 small breaths, 1 long stir. The bird's call becomes a cue. When the hawk is circling twice, the moon is no longer romantic, it's a calendar. You, the designated insomniac observer, have to fight the urge to nap your way through crucial dosing notes. The baby across from you solves that problem by falling asleep decisively, thereby proving the song is at least effective for its cover story. Mainstream fact, the sequel. Mnemonic poetry is everywhere. Medical students still sing cranial nerves to nursery tunes. Sailors once counted knots to chants. Farmers time sowing to proverbs that fit the mouth better than almanacs fit a pocket. Here, the same logic meets the rainforest. You can misplace a gourd, you can't misplace the chorus stuck in your head. The shaman lifts his hand and the room hushes to a thread. Some verses you sing out, he says, some you keep here. He taps his chest, and some you only hum. It's not a riddle, it's a boundary. He turns to the outer wall, where ochre lines spiral into frogs and vines and blowguns. The pictures remind us what not to forget. The songs remind us how not to forget it. You feel the distinction settle like ash. Quiet, precise, final. Quirky tidbit. A boy brags that he can sing the noisy versions of 3 work songs backward. His aunt rolls her eyes so hard you hear it. The shaman smiles and challenges him to hum the quiet parts forward with his mouth closed. The boy tries, fails, and everyone laughs. The kind of laughter that snips arrogance before it grows naughty. Outside, a night insect starts its metronome. Inside, the song shifts again, this time to warning. The tempo slows to the speed of stirring, and the words narrow to verbs you can hold like tools. Cut, scrape, bind, wait. The wait stretches, unrushed, long enough for your shoulders to melt. You catch the lesson embedded in the yawn. Patience is not absence of action. Patience is the action you can hear if you sit still enough. Historians still argue whether melodic structures in these songs map to procedural timing. Whether, for instance, a verse's length equals a boil stage or a stirring cycle. Some field notes swear yes, others demur. You suspect the answer lies in the singer. A skilled voice can measure time without counting, the way a seasoned cook knows water has just become sauce. The elders invite the children to sing their own verses, play, but pointed. One girl belts out a line about the vine that yawns at dawn, and half the adults nod because they've said that very thing beside a real cut and real bark. A boy counters with, the feather that frowns when it drips, and everyone laughs because they frowned with that feather too. You feel the boundary between joke and instruction do that jungle thing it always does, blur in the most useful way. The last song is the softest, barely there, more breath than sound. It promises sleep to the baby, safety to the hunters, generosity to the forest, and discretion to the listener who knows when to sing and when to be a wall. It's so tender you could forget it's about poison at all. That's the spell. In this room, lethality is wrapped in lullaby paper and tied with a bow of patience. When the singing ebbs, people move like they've been unspooled, stretching, smiling, putting away knowledge without putting it down. A girl leans into her mother's side and mouths the words of the second verse silently, testing whether they'll stay without sound. They do. You try the same, and the lines land where songs always land. In the place you keep your first phone number and the smell of a childhood kitchen. On your way out, the shaman stops you with a palm light on your shoulder. Now you see, he says, voice a hush even the insects respect, why you cannot buy this. He gestures at the room, the sleeping baby, the rattle, the smoke. You can buy a knife, you can buy a map, but a song you must be sung into. Outside, the night is velvet. The river keeps its low conversation with the bank. A macaw mutters an opinion to nobody in particular. You stand there a long moment, humming nothing, feeling full of something that isn't yours and yet won't leave. When you finally lie down, the melody stays, measuring your breath the way a good friend counts steps beside you. Morning drifts in the color of steeped tea, and you find the hunters gathered not for boiling or fletching, but for sorting. A mat is spread with the tired things of survival, bent shafts, split nocks, feathers frayed to fuzz, and 2 darts whose tips have gone blunt from too many lessons against banana stalks. It looks at first like a junk pile. Then the work begins, and the junk becomes a future. An elder lifts a cracked shaft and warms it over a coal until the wood sighs, then coaxes it straight across his knee. Another trims a feather to new symmetry, turning ruin back into flight with 3 careful snips. Children sit close, appointed scavengers of usefulness. One rescues a thread of sinew, another teases a fleck of resin from an old tip and rolls it into a pea-sized pellet for later glue. You realize the arrow's life doesn't end in the forest. It changes jobs. A woman claims a handful of splinters and binds them into a tiny brush for painting Jenny Papo dye onto faces. A boy files a broken tip into an awl for puncturing bark fiber. A girl, solemn as a jeweler, strings 2 bright fragments as beads and ties them around her wrist. Not poison, her mother reminds her, touching the wood. The girl nods. Beauty without danger, this time. Mainstream fact. Many Amazonian groups practice rigorous reuse. Arrows were straightened over heat, refletched repeatedly, and when finally spent, their parts became tools. Awls, fish gorges, spindle pins, skewers, even weaving picks. Feathers migrated from shafts to head dresses. Cordage from binding stitched baskets. In places where carrying dead weight is a tax on breath, nothing stayed single purpose for long. You watch an older boy turn a snapped dart into a door whisper, a sliver hung by a thread near the longhouse entrance. When a breeze stirs, it clicks softly against a shell. So the house knows you came, he says, grinning. A grandmother adds another shard to the bundle by the doorway, today's tally to keep track of how many hunters are returned. A bead for each body, a quiet census in wood and sound. Quirky tidbit. A woman shows you a charm she swears keeps gossip from sticking. 2 tiny shaft pieces lashed in an X and worn in her hair. Tongue slide off, she says, deadpan. An aunt counters that her ex keeps mosquitoes from finding the part in her braid. Everyone laughs. The charm does both, of course. That's how charms earn tenure. The poison bits are another matter. Men sit apart with a shallow pit of ash, a patient fire, and a bowl of astringent smelling leaves. Tips that still gleam are touched, with the leaves to soften clinging paste, then heated until the resin blisters and flakes. No one rushes. Once clean, the points are hammered flat for scrapers or stored for regrinding. One tip that refuses to come clean is retired like a dangerous elder, buried in ash, marked by 3 stones, a grave the children are taught to step around. Respect continues past usefulness. A girl arrives clutching a dart you recognize from yesterday's practice. It's fletching a comically oversized macaw fluff. She hands it to the shaman, who smiles and turns it into a teaching stick. He binds a seed rattle to one end and scratches a memory line along its length, one notch for don't point, another for don't breathe toward the tip, a third for don't lay it where hands nap. The boy who once wore a dart behind his ear to look grand, remember that cautionary tale, is tasked with guarding the stick during lessons. He accepts with an exaggeratedly humble bow. Progress. Historians still argue whether these afterlives of arrows, charms at doorways, hairpins, rattle handles were mostly pragmatic recycling, or whether they signaled status and protection, broadcasting that a household kept the hunt's power without its risk. Were the fragments trophies, talismans, or simply the most convenient small stick? The answer, like so much here, seems to depend on who is holding it and what the day needs. The elder who loves quiet jokes ties 3 feather nubs to a string and hangs them above the fish rack. Wind tells us if smoke is lazy, he says. When the feathers lie still, someone fans the coals. When they tremble, everyone hums approval. Your modern brain labels it a low-tech airflow monitor. The elder calls it listening to your house. A boy carves a pair of dice, little cubes shaved from an old hardwood point pipped with charcoal. He and his sister play a silent game, roll, gesture, move a bead around a circle scratched in the dust. The bead is a berry today, tomorrow it will be a beetle shell. The rules seem to change mid-game, and yet both children agree on them immediately. You suspect this is excellent training for adult negotiations. One woman takes an arrow fragment and lashes it to a weaving shuttle, the slim blade of wood helping her slip strands where fingers are too blunt. Each pass of the shuttle makes a sound like distant rain. Weaving likes old arrows, she tells you. They remember straight. You nod, storing the line where you keep the shaman's proverb about songs. Another hunter trims a small fork from a cracked shaft and ties it to a cord, a hook for hanging gourds near the ceiling, out of reach of inquisitive dogs. He tests it with the infamous tin whistle, handy for once, and when the cord holds, the whistle dangles beside dried peppers, finally useful in silence. Mainstream Fact, the sequel. Museum collections sometimes catalog ornamental darts and ceremonial arrows with brilliant featherwork and blunted tips, objects traded or gifted without their dangerous core. Scholars note that such items often bear reuse marks. Bindings that once held points now hold pendants, fletching patched more for color than for flight. A life of work, then a life of meaning. A small council forms around a bundle of snap shafts. Boundary business. The village edge has a footpath where strangers sometimes wander closer than manners allow. Today, those snap pieces are planted at ankle height along the path's curve, fletching outward, a polite fence of color. Not a trap, not a threat, just a sentence. This is a home. The children carry the fragments like flags, and the line they build is too pretty to be hostile. Still, you would think twice before stepping over it. Quirky tidbit. One household strings a handful of hollowed fragments into a wind chime. When storms roll in, the chime ticks and clacks, and a grandfather swears he can hear which rafters will leak by the pitch. He taps his ear, then the roof. Forest first here, then here. He winks, borrowing the elder's lesson about listening with chest as well as ear. You enjoy the callback more than you should. A final transformation happens quietly. The stories. Each salvaged piece collects a sentence. This was the monkey that fed your naming feast. This was the peccary that fell near the bent palm. This one, see the scar? Met a tree before it met a bird. Fragments become tags for memory, and memory becomes the way a child learns geography without maps. The bend with the whispering reeds, the log with the soldier ants, the clearing where hawks circle twice. You help coil a length of cord braided from retired bowstring and hair. It will bind a basket, then a sleeping roll, then, years from now, a child's bundle of feathers and stories. The cord is warm from your hands by the time you finish. You consider how many small things carry a place better than anything that admits it is a map. As the sorting ends, a woman sweeps the mat with a palm broom. A single splinter remains, a sliver no longer than your thumbnail. A child picks it up, considers, then presses it into the mud beside the longhouse so it stands like a tiny mast. He ties a thread of dyed fiber to the top and watches it flutter. "Wind's going east," he announces grandly. He's right. Everyone nods as if he has just read the sky, which in a way, he has. The day softens toward evening. Baskets are fuller, hooks hang steadier. Door whispers click under a new breeze. The ash pit is covered, its 3 stones settled like a period at the end of a careful sentence. You look around and see no waste, only things in their next lives. The arrow is all, as shuttle, as charm, as fence, as tiny weather flag. Survival is not only how to make, it is how to keep making, long after first purposes pass. You catch yourself checking the wind chime map of the rafters as you step outside. The feathers stir just enough to say rain will think about it. You smile and the forest seems to return the expression in leaf and light. Remember that monkey skull rattle? It shakes once from somewhere inside, not warning this time, just marking the rhythm of a place where even broken arrows keep a beat. The morning after the arrow salvage, you wake to a sound that is not the usual forest gossip. It is a pulse, low and steady, rising from the ground itself. You step outside and find the longhouse already alive with anticipation. The hunters smear charcoal on their arms. Women weave quick anklets of dried palm that rattle faintly, and children paint circles on each other's cheeks with auricum red. Something bigger than a hunt or a lesson is about to happen. A boy notices your confusion and whispers, "Festival." He grins, tugging your sleeve. "For the poison." At first, the idea feels absurd, celebrating something so dangerous. But as the day unfolds, you realize it is not poison they celebrate, but the balance it represents. The fine line between hunger and feast, life and silence, respect and carelessness. Drums begin, wooden logs struck with sticks, resonant as thunder rolling through hollow trees. The rhythm is hypnotic, the kind that pulls your chest into its beat. Men lift blowguns and move in choreographed steps, circling, weaving, lifting and aiming at invisible prey. Women follow with rattles and gourds, shaking in patterns that echo the sound of boiling pots. Children run between them, their laughter weaving the whole into something larger than performance. Mainstream fact: many Amazonian cultures mark seasonal cycles, successful hunts, or collective tasks with ritual dances and music. These festivals often blurred the line between the practical and the spiritual, honoring tools, animals, or natural forces through songs and movements that encoded both gratitude and instruction. The dancers mimic the forest. One bends his body low like a stalking jaguar. Another hops with knees tucked, imitating the sudden spring of a monkey. Blowguns raise and fall in unison, their darts tipped only with paint today, staining leaves blue or red where they land. Children shriek with joy, chasing the colorful marks as if they were fireflies pinned to daylight. Quirky tidbit: a trickster element sneaks in. One man straps a gourd to his head and pretends to be a tapir, snorting and charging clumsily while others chase him with painted darts. He collapses dramatically, rolling in the dust, tongue lolling. The crowd howls with laughter. Later, you hear that every festival includes a tapir fool, usually the same uncle, whose job is to remind everyone that even deadly arts deserve humor. The shaman appears, painted in black spirals, carrying a gourd filled with dark paste. He holds it high, and the drumming slows. Everyone quiets. He dips a feather, then raises it to the sky, letting a single drop glisten before it falls back into the gourd. His words are low but clear. We hold silence. We hold life. We hold danger. Respect them all. The crowd responds with a murmur that rolls like surf. Historians still argue whether these rituals were truly religious ceremonies or more like seasonal reminders of collective responsibility. Were they worship or governance disguised in song? Watching now, you see no distinction. It is reverence and regulation braided into rhythm, an annual reminder that secrets are not just personal, they are communal property. The music surges again, faster now. Women stomp in time, their anklets rattling like insects in chorus. Children leap over imaginary vines. Hunters spin their blowguns like staffs, then pause, darting them toward the sky as if to pierce clouds. The whole longhouse is a storm contained in wood and voice. You are pulled into the circle. A blowgun is pressed into your hands, not loaded, just painted at the tip. The elder motions for you to dance, to step and mimic. Awkwardly, you lift it, exhale a silent beft, and aim at the ground. A boy dives dramatically, clutching his chest, then pops back up, grinning. The crowd laughs, accepting your clumsy initiation. You bow, exaggerating, and join the rhythm. Quirky tidbit. Between dances, vendors of sorts appear, women passing roasted plantains and cups of fermented drink, children offering bundles of feathers in exchange for scraps of cloth or beads. It feels both like a party and a lesson. Survival is sweeter when shared, even in miniature economies. As the festival peaks, the drumming softens into a heartbeat tempo. The shaman circles the crowd, sprinkling smoke from smoldering leaves, brushing each person lightly with a feather. When he reaches you, he taps your forehead once. Now you carry it too, he murmurs. You shiver, unsure if he means the knowledge, the respect, or the responsibility. Perhaps all three. The day fades into twilight, and the music slows. People rest against pillars, sweaty and smiling. Children collapse into sleep mid-laugh, faces smeared with red paint and dust. The gourd of poison is sealed again, placed in the ash pit with care. What was honored returns to silence. As stars emerge, you sit outside, body still humming with the rhythm of drums. You realize that poison here is never just substance. It is story, song, festival, memory. The people dance not to glorify death, but to rehearse the respect that keeps them alive. The morning after the festival feels strangely still, as if the forest itself is resting from all that drumming. Smoke curls lazily from cook fires. Children sprawl half asleep on mats, and the hunters sharpen their knives in slow, unhurried strokes. You think today will be quiet until the dogs begin barking toward the river. Everyone stiffens. A scout jogs back into the clearing, breath fast, words clipped. You don't need translation to catch the meaning. Strangers again. The mood shifts instantly. The women gather children inside, the hunters check quivers, and the elders rise with a kind of dignity that says they've done this before. You follow at the edge of the group as they slip into the undergrowth, silent as mist. At the riverbank, you see them. Not the bearded traders from before, but another band, leaner, hungrier, eyes darting with suspicion. They carry spears instead of oars, their movements less bumbling and more wolfish. They've made no gifts, no displays. They've come with questions in their eyes and tension in their shoulders. Mainstream fact: intertribal conflict in the Amazon sometimes centered not on land, there's plenty of forest, but on knowledge, resources, or prestige. Poisons, blowgun skill, and access to the best vines or hunting grounds could provoke raids or uneasy negotiations. Arrow poison wasn't just survival tech, it was leverage. The elders step forward, empty hands raised, but their posture is not submissive. They are saying, "We are here, we are prepared, we are watching." The rival leader gestures at the bundles carried by your hosts, gourds you know contain the dark paste of poison. He points at them, then at himself, then spreads his hands in a demand. A murmur runs through your group. Quirky tidbit. One hunter whispers to you that such demands are sometimes met with gifts of harmless mixtures, arrow tips smeared with resin, or plant juices that sting but don't kill. Outsiders leave convinced they've stolen a secret, only to discover they've armed themselves with irritant soup. The hunter's grin is wicked, but his eyes never leave the strangers. Nestorians still argue whether rivalries over poison were primarily practical, fighting over hunting success, or symbolic, with poison as a marker of identity and status. Was demanding curare a way of demanding submission, or simply a shortcut to the forest's harder lessons? Scholars divide. Here, the tension in the air suggests it's both. Negotiations unfold in silence and gestures. A gourd is set down, its lid loosely tied. The rival leader eyes it suspicious. He mutters something sharp. The elder replies with a smile that holds no warmth. The standoff stretches until the rival finally reaches for the gourd. The hunters around you shift, just enough for him to notice. He pauses, then picks it up more carefully. Power, you realize, is being measured in centimeters, in pauses, in who breathes first. The rival men retreat to their canoes, gourds in hand. One turns to sneer, dipping a finger inside and sniffing it boldly. He recoils immediately, cursing. The hunters around you stifle grins, because you know that gourd carried nothing but a brew of bitter roots and ashes. Harmless. Decoy. The elders nod to each other, satisfied. A secret protected by mockery is still protected. On the walk back, the tension lingers. One hunter mutters, "They will come again." Another replies, "And they will leave again." No bravado in the words, just fact. You think about how fragile and how strong this balance is. One gourd, one exchange, standing between peace and blood. Back in the longhouse, the elders gather everyone. "You saw," one says, his voice low but firm. "They want what we have, but the forest doesn't give to greedy hands, it gives to careful ones." The children nod solemnly. Even the smallest now understands arrows are not just tools. They are identity, protection, bargaining chips in games that can stretch across generations. Or quirky tidbit. One boy pipes up, "Maybe we should give them frog songs instead." The longhouse bursts into laughter, the tension breaking like a dry twig. The boy beams, proud of his joke, and the monkey skull rattle shakes in approval. Humor once again saves the air. The night falls heavy, filled with the chorus of frogs and the occasional distant cry of a bird. You lie awake replaying the scene at the river. The rivals sneer, the elders smile, the gourd full of lies. You realize the true secret isn't just in the poison. It's in knowing when to give nothing, when to give a decoy, when to guard silence with patience. Survival here is not only arrows flying through leaves. It is the pause before the arrow, the false gift that protects the true one, the laughter that hides the edge of fear. The forest may teach poison, but people teach cunning. The morning is bright in a slightly different way today. The kind of brightness that arrives on metal roofs instead of palm thatch. You step outside and the rain doesn't drum a deep lullaby anymore. It ricochets, quick and tinny, like coins on a table. A few new houses have gone up near the old longhouse, boards smelling of sawdust, windows reflecting the river like polished knives. The path to the landing is wider, tamped by more feet, the packed dirt freckled with bits of plastic wrapper that glare at you like tiny, disapproving parrots. you feel a small ache. Secrets prefer leaf litter to litter. Down by the water, a motor coughs, then purrs into a steady growl. A boat noses in with sacks of rice, a crate of salt, some shirts, a bundle of metal pots, and a stack of batteries. The hunters wave practical and cheerful. The forest doesn't hold grudges about useful things, but you notice fewer blowguns leaning in the doorway and more shotguns wrapped in oiled cloth. The old dart racks, remember the feather salutes, hang higher now, dustier, their tips capped and sleeping. Knowledge hasn't vanished. It's napping with one eye open. Mainstream fact. Throughout the 20th century, contact with traders and missions brought firearms into many Amazonian regions, and with them a gradual shift away from blowguns and poisoned darts for big game. Shotguns shorten the chase. Cartridges are easier to store than a song. In some communities, the two methods coexist, but the balance tilts with each delivery boat. A boy sprints past, bare feet thumping, and skids to a stop at the longhouse. He reaches under the eaves and shakes the string of door whispers, those little arrow slivers that click when you come home. The click is faint now because the new doorway has a metal hinge that squeals louder. Someone will oil it, or someone won't. Doors keep their own kind of memory. You find the elder by the ash pit, turning over 3 familiar stones, the same that mark where old dangerous tips go to sleep. He smiles, then gestures to a small gridded notebook tucked into his belt. For names, he says, patting the cover. You thumb it open carefully. Inside are plant sketches, scribbled in pencil. The vine that yawns at dawn, the resin that sings when stirred, the leaf that listens. Beside them, someone has written a few words in Portuguese and a few in a neighboring language. The elder shrugs. Easier for the new ones, he says. He means the children who read faster than they hum. Quirky tidbit. One teenager has set the frog's trill as his phone ringtone. When it chirps, half the village glances instinctively toward the riverbank. He grins and calls it forest mode. You roll your eyes, then admit the prank is clever, and a decent alarm in a place where small signals matter. Historians still argue whether writing down orally guarded recipes and names protects knowledge from vanishing or accelerates the loss by tempting it out of its proper home. Is a notebook a life raft or a leak? Some say that without paper, old songs will sink when elders drift away. Others say the song must live in breath to stay accurate. The debate has a heartbeat, and tonight it's tapping in pencil. A girl shows you a basket dyed the old way, urucum red, Genipapo black, then flips it over to reveal she wove a little QR looking pattern into the base for fun. It's a joke in straw, a square inside spirals. You laugh because the pattern doesn't scan to anything but still somehow reads, I can be both. She knows how to tie the quick release calf knot so vines don't say your name. And she also knows how to charge a flashlight off a solar panel that flaps on the roof like a lazy rectangular bird. She wears a strand of copper wire, remember the mirror day? Braided with palm fiber on one wrist. The forest and the market shake hands and compare bracelets. Under the longhouse, a boy who once guarded stirring sticks now guards a cooler filled with ice. Clear, glassy, miraculous. He drops a cube into a gourd of juice. It clinks. The sound is so un-Amazonian that everyone giggles. You sip and nearly cry from the luxury of cold. Somewhere, a macaw complains that even water is getting ideas. You sit with a grandmother who is splicing a cracked blowgun, coaxing the halves to align so perfectly the seam vanishes. For the little ones, she says, they should learn with the tube, not only the noise stick. She means the shotgun. The blowgun still teaches breath, patience, the exact angle of a leaf's tremble. She ties the binding, licks a thumb, smooths the resin. The tool looks newborn. You realize vanishing isn't always sudden? Sometimes it's a long negotiation where old tutors keep their chairs even as new teachers stroll in late. Mainstream Fact, the sequel. Language shift shadows this too. Across the Amazon, dozens of languages count only a handful of elders who speak them fully. When a verb for listen with your chest fades, it can be replaced by record or download, and something precise, something you could feel in your ribs, thins a little. UNESCO reports classify such languages as vulnerable, endangered, nearly extinct, using words that feel too clinical for voices that once stirred poison to the tempo of a lullaby. The shaman kneels near a little clinic hut with a white cross painted on its plank. He walks you through a tidy shelf, antibiotics, painkillers, a blood pressure cuff whose rubber bulb smells vaguely of balloons and birthdays. He nods approval at the pills, then rests a hand on a gourd of bitter tea. Both, he says, and taps the shelf, then the gourd. He isn't nostalgic, he is practical. Fever yields to whichever door you knock first. You think of the chant that measured 5 small breaths, 1 long stir, and wonder what melody fits a dosage label. Quirky tidbit. Last month, the festival's tapir fool replaced his gourd head with a cardboard box head painted like a tapir with sunglasses. The children howled. The elders pretended not to. Later, during the serious part, the shaman dabbed a single drop from the old poison gourd on a feather and held it in the firelight as always. The cardboard tapir bowed and everyone nodded. Humor updates. Respect remains backward compatible. Historians still argue whether the arrival of schools, clinics, and markets inevitably erodes traditional knowledge, or whether hybrid expertise can be more resilient. Forest literacy plus spreadsheet literacy, blowgun breath plus lab gloves. The case studies line up on both sides. Watching the elder's notebook tucked beside a gourd, you suspect the forest votes for both, with a sly footnote, so long as the songs keep time. You walk to the old wind chime map of rafters, the one that tells which beams will leak by the pitch. It still ticks, softer under the metal roof, but tick it does. A child who wasn't born when you first listened stands there, head cocked, and announces, "East." He is right. The tiny weather flag you helped a child make from an arrow sliver fluttered the same way earlier. The signals haven't changed. Only some of the receivers have batteries now. Downriver, a new town glows at night. Single bulbs strung like cautious stars. The elders joke that the sky fell and landed along the bank. Boats move later, conversations last longer, and the frog ringtone occasionally startles the moon. But when dawn comes, the elder still tests a paste with a feather. When the feather bends and doesn't drip, he nods to himself. Some metrics remain unimpressed by volts. And yet, you feel it, a thinning at the edges. An old hunter gestures vaguely for a plant name he once could pluck from the air. A teenager reaches first for cartridges when a shadow moves at the tree line. A lullaby pauses because the next line has wandered off to look at the phone. You don't scold the moment, you just witness it. Vanishing rarely shouts, it sighs. That night, the longhouse hums smaller than usual. The monkey school rattle shakes once and then rests. The tin whistle lies on a beam, demoted to hook. The shaman hums the chorus that ties cut, scrape, bind, wait, and 2 children hum with him, out of sync but enthusiastic. You exhale, slow and snake-like, timing your breath to theirs. Loss isn't the only story here. Continuity wears new shoes. Before sleep, you walk to the ash pit. The 3 stones are still there, patient as punctuation. You place a splinter from a retired shaft beside them. A child notices, plants it upright, and ties a fiber thread to make a tiny flag. "Wind's going east," he says again, as if translating for the river. You smile. Tomorrow, someone will boil a small pot for medicine. Someone will sketch a leaf in the elder's notebook. Someone will check the feather that frowns when it drips. The secrets aren't gone. They're whispering at a different volume. You lean closer. The days stretch on, and you notice the forest itself beginning to change shape in your mind. No longer just a backdrop, it has become a library, though its shelves are moving, hissing, buzzing. Today, you're invited to follow the hunters again, not to stalk prey or to trade glances with rivals, but to gather the plants themselves. You have seen the arrows, the elder tells you, now you see the roots. The group sets out at dawn, baskets slung on backs, machetes glinting. The air is thick with dew, every leaf dripping as though the forest cried overnight. Children scamper at the edges, not to play, but to carry knowledge in their ears. What you thought was going to be a simple walk becomes something more, an anatomy lesson written in vines and bark. The first stop is a patch of liana coiled around a towering tree. A hunter slices into the vine and sap beads along the cut like sweat. He touches it, then quickly wipes his fingers on a leaf, reminding everyone, even you, that this is not water. This one sleeps, he says, miming closed eyes. Everyone nods. Later, you learn its sap dulls movement when brewed properly. Mainstream fact. In many regions, multiple plant species contributed to arrow poison preparations. The most famous, Chondrodendron tomentosum, is only one among dozens. Recipes varied by season, geography, and family tradition. Some emphasize paralysis, others quick collapse. The forest was a pharmacy with an infinite shelf, and no two bottles carried identical labels. The hunters move on, stopping at a tree with bark that flakes into papery curls. An elder chips off a piece, crumbles it, and lets you smell. The scent is spicy, resinous, almost pleasant. Fire bark, he says, waving his hand. Good for arrows, good for ants. He means it burns both ways, in wounds and in fevers. The children mimic his gesture, locking smell to word, memory to body. Quirky tidbit. One boy jokes that when monkeys see this bark, they hold their noses and run. He cups his hands to his face in exaggerated disgust, and the younger children collapse in laughter. Whether monkeys truly do or not, the story sticks like resin. You realize humor is a mnemonic device just as powerful as chant. Historians still argue whether outsiders ever truly cataloged the full diversity of poisonous plants used in these brews. Some field notes list 5 species, others dozens. The inconsistency hints at deliberate secrecy. Show a visitor one vine, withhold the 4 others, and you've given nothing away. The recipes survive in whispers, not inventories. By midday, the baskets grow heavy with leaves, bark, vines, each carefully bundled and marked with a scrap of fiber. One bundle oozes a pale latex that hardens quickly, sticking to your fingers when you touch it by mistake. A hunter smirks and hands you a leaf to wipe it off. Otherwise, he warns, your hand forgets how to open. You obey quickly, heart thudding. Lesson learned. At a clearing, the group rests. Women unwrap packets of roasted cassava, passing pieces around. A girl shows you how to rub a crumb of the latex between her palms. It makes a faint squeak, like wet leather. She giggles and says it's the song of sticky fingers. You laugh, but she's serious too. It's how she'll remember which vine hardens this way. Mainstream fact, the sequel. Botany today confirms many of these plants are chemically complex. Alkaloids, resins, saponins, compounds that act on nerves, muscles, blood. But for generations, no one described them with chemistry. Instead, they use metaphors. Vines that sleep, barks that burn, saps that sing. The language itself is diagnostic. The hunt for plants ends at a swampy patch where the earth smells of decay and frogs. Here, the most prized vines wind low across the ground, their roots thick as wrists. The hunters cut carefully, not killing the whole plant. One explains, take too much, vine dies. Take little, vine lives. Sustainability is not a slogan here. It is survival math. Quirky tidbit. One woman claims that vines scream if you cut them wrong, but only jaguars can hear it. A child gasps, wide-eyed, and the woman winks. Lesson reinforced: cut respectfully or risk angering creatures you don't want to meet. Historians still argue whether sustainable harvesting practices were born of ecological foresight or simply necessity. Did people understand long-term balance, or did they just notice when patches ran out? Watching today, it feels insulting to even ask. Balance isn't theory, it's habit, bone deep, unquestioned. By the time you return, the baskets are overflowing, the smell of sap clinging to your clothes, a cocktail of sweet, bitter, sharp. In the longhouse, the plants are sorted. Some will be boiled, some dried, some hidden. Children hover close, absorbing silently, like roots pulling water. You sit back, dizzy from scent and meaning. The forest no longer looks random. Each vine has a voice, each bark a note, each leaf a role in the orchestra of survival. You realize the poison you saw on arrow tips is not a single secret. It is dozens, layered, guarded, sung. When night falls, the elders hum again, soft refrains that sound like lullabies till you hear the plant names threaded within. You drift towards sleep, your nose still tingling with resin, your mind heavy with vines curling into memory. The forest greets you one last time with its usual paradox, loud with cicadas, yet quiet with meaning. You sit outside the longhouse in the blue light of dawn, watching smoke climb lazily upward, carrying with it the memory of vines, frogs, feathers, and songs. The people move softly today, as if the village itself is exhaling. You realize you've walked through an entire cycle, from the first glimpse of boiling pots to the laughter of festivals, from rival threats at the river to quiet lessons sung like lullabies. A boy approaches with a blowgun tucked under his arm. He doesn't hand it to you this time. He simply sits beside you, mimicking your breathing. His exhale is steady, snake-like, practiced. Yours is shaky, still learning. He grins, nudges your shoulder, then stares out at the forest. You sense he doesn't need to prove anything anymore. He already knows he carries the secret. All he wants is for you to notice that it breathes beside him. Mainstream fact: by the late 20th century, curare and its derivatives had become staples of modern medicine. Used in surgery as muscle relaxants, they allow doctors to perform procedures that once would have been impossible. What began in clay pots with chance beside smoky fires eventually entered sterile operating rooms, saving lives instead of ending them. The irony is heavy but fitting. The forest always offered both edges. The shaman joins you, lowering himself with the quiet creak of years. He holds out a feather, stained dark at the tip. Remember, he says simply, not everything is for arrows, not everything is for sickness. Some things are only for silence. He plants the feather in the ground where it stands upright, trembling slightly in the breeze. You nod. The feather does not need translation. Quirky tidbit. One child, too young to grasp solemnity, sticks another feather beside it and declares, "Now the forest has 2 ears." The adults chuckle softly. The shaman smiles and lets the joke stand. Humor is its own kind of memory. Historians still argue how much of this knowledge will survive the next century. Will notebooks and recordings preserve what songs once carried? Or will the secrets dissolve like resin in rain once the last elder falls silent? No consensus exists. But looking around, you feel the answer is less fragile than outsiders fear. The songs are still being sung, even if sometimes into microphones instead of firelight. The day moves gently toward evening. Fish are roasted, children tumble and play. The monkey skull rattle shakes once in approval, then rests. The elders sit in a ring, voices low, faces carved with lines that look like maps of rivers. They aren't debating, they are remembering. And memory here is an action as powerful as hunting. As dust settles, you walk once more to the ash pit. The 3 stones remain, guardians of forgotten arrows, punctuation marks in the dirt. You kneel, press your palm against the warm earth, and feel the hum that has threaded every lesson. Danger, respect, patience, silence. The stars rise. The longhouse glows faintly, painted faces moving in and out of firelight. You hear one last chant, a lullaby in which the forest names itself. Frog, vine, river, moon. Each word drifts into the night like a dart vanishing into leaves. Now, let everything slow. The drums are gone, the laughter hushed. The forest itself exhales, stretching its arms across the night. You lie back, eyes half closed, the hum of insects soft as distant rain. Imagine the vines loosening around the trees, the frogs tucking themselves under leaves, the arrows sleeping in their bundles. The danger has gone quiet, the secrets folded carefully away like blankets at the end of the day. Your breath falls into rhythm with the river, slow and forgiving. Inhale, cool air that smells faintly of smoke and flowers. Exhale, warmth that carries your restlessness away. The poison, once so sharp and frightening, has become only a memory of patience, a reminder that even the deadliest things can be softened when held with respect. The longhouse glows faintly behind your eyelids, a safe lantern in the forest. Inside, children sleep curled like question marks. Elders breathe evenly. The monkey skull rattle rests silent. Outside, the stars climb higher, patient, eternal. Their light filters through the canopy in slow silver threads, stitching the night together. You drift further, as though you too are part of the forest. Another leaf, another sound folded into the chorus. No pressure, no urgency, only the endless patience of vines and the steady hush of water against the bank. Let yourself loosen as the forest loosens. Let your thoughts fade like the last smoke leaving the rafters. You are safe here. You are carried by silence, wrapped in respect, lulled by secrets you no longer need to hold awake. Sleep now. The arrows can wait. The forest will keep humming until morning.